Hey everybody, today Rahdo talks through episode 13 of his podcast. We are beginning the second year, although perhaps not as well as we could have since I'm a couple of weeks late. Very sorry for that, but it's been a very, very busy couple of weeks. Hopefully this will get me back on track, and today, as always, we're going to talk about a bunch of new games and talk about a top 10 topic and answer a whole bunch of questions, which Jen will join me for. So, without further ado, let's get right to it right after this. Okay, first up, new and exciting games that are coming soon to whatever retail establishment you might frequent sometime this year. These are going to be some very, very cool games that I am certainly excited for, and let me tell you why. We're going to start with Pandemic Iberia, which is interesting because I actually got a chance to play this last year at BGG-Con. I sat down and did a prototype playthrough hosted by Matt Leacock himself with a bunch of other people, and I got to play it firsthand. What is it? Basically, it is a rethemed version of Pandemic set in Spain in the 1800s during the early expansion of the railway lines all over that country, connecting it all together, the Iberian Peninsula as a whole, which is absolutely incredibly important to help spread to help fight the spread of malaria, typhus, yellow fever, and cholera. And that is what players will be doing, taking on the traditional roles as you find in Pandemic, but tweaked ever so slightly to be more historically accurate, or certainly more historically flavorful. And we found it to be a very, very interesting thing. Now, it's been a while since I played this. If I recall correctly, the two big things that jump out are there's no more air travel, of course, because it's the 1850s. And so moving around the board is a slightly more arduous process. You have to walk from A to B. Now, there is sea travel. If you're at any point along the outer edges of the peninsula, you can very quickly travel from one side of the world to the other, kind of like airplanes. But the other thing you can do is, if you want to spend a fair bit of your time and effort, you can actually build up rail lines that lets anybody ride lickety-split from one side of the peninsula to the other. And so that becomes a new goal that players are trying to work on, to create these pathways that let them get from hotspot to hotspot. Because, of course, like regular Pandemic, the same cities are going to keep getting hit over and over and over again. So you do have to build a strong rail network that will let you keep them under control, because you just can't fly around willy-nilly anymore. And now at the same time, the other thing you're really focusing on is water. Specifically, distributing purified water to function very, very similarly to the, what are they called? The quarantine stuff that was introduced in Pandemic. Which one is it? Hinterlands, the Pandemic Hinterlands. If I recall correctly, it worked kind of like that. And although it was interesting, you don't actually put the stuff... Oh man, it's all a blur now. You don't put it on the individual cities. You put it on connecting lines between the two cities so that the water can feed adjacent cities and protect them from the spread of disease. It was a really solid game, really interesting twists. The characters all had unique special powers, although they were obviously very, very inspired by the original game, and we all had a good time playing. And I know at that point it was still going through a lot of tweaking, a lot of balancing, a lot of testing, and I can't wait for the final thing. Now, an interesting thing about it is Matt Leacock did not design this alone. And in fact, I talked to him about it a little bit. I think I got the impression that he had such a good time working with Rob Davio on Pandemic Legacy that he wants to do more designer collaborations. So he is working with a Spanish designer, Jesus Torres Castro, to actually put this together. And it's interesting, he's working with a different designer to work on Pandemic, the Cthulhu Pandemic. And I think this is going to be something that we're seeing as a series of games going forward, every year, maybe every 6 months, another variation, another flavor of Pandemic where he has collaborated with another designer who will bring their own fresh new ideas. And I think that's really awesome. It's a really cool way to keep Pandemic vibrant and alive and growing, rather than just putting out expansion after expansion after expansion, which implicitly limits you in some ways. Just being able to take the shackles off and do whatever you want by setting the pandemic formula in a completely new circumstance, I just think that's brilliant, and I can't wait to see what's coming in the future. In the meantime, I'd really love to play Pandemic Iberia with Jen. So, moving on, we next have Sagrada, which I think Sagrada Familia is a famous church, if I recall correctly. It's something like that. And while we're not running a church in this game from Floodgate Games, we are constructing stained glass windows, and we're doing it through dice drafting. I just cannot, dice drafting is just exploding these days. This is not the only dice drafting game I'm going to be talking about today. It's just becoming such a widely explored mechanism. It's just popping up all over the place. It's funny that I've recently named it my number one favorite game mechanism of all time. So I'm very, very happy to see more new and interesting things. So what are you doing? What are you drafting dice for here? Well, basically, it's a whole bunch of different colored dice, and players are taking turns grabbing the dice. The dice actually represent all the different colored mosaic pieces that will go into your stained glass windows. And there's all kinds of special rules you have to follow for placing them down. And I suspect it's going to be awesome because Floodgate Games is awesome, and dice drafting is awesome. One of the designers, Daryl Andrews, did a fantastic job on, what was it? Walled City, which was a very, very cool game. And his co-designer on this, Adrian Adamescu, I'm not really familiar with him. I think he's kind of new to the game. But still, I'm just really, really excited by the idea. Jen loves stained glass windows. I haven't actually seen any pictures of this yet, but the idea of having this grid that you're trying to fill out with all these beautiful, colorful dice that you're drafting for, and having special rules you have to follow, but breaking those rules, and it sounds really, really cool. Cannot wait. Now, strictly speaking, this is a 2017 game, according to Board Game Geek, but I'd be willing to bet my bottom dollar that it will be on Kickstarter in 2016. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's a 2016 game, and fingers crossed that Floodgate actually contacts me and maybe sends me a prototype so I can do a run-through for it, because it sounds really cool. But anyway, let's move on to Shakespeare Backstage, which is the first expansion for the excellent worker placement / auction game that I did a run through for last year called Shakespeare. That game was absolutely phenomenal, one of the best games of the year, and now they're coming out with their first expansion that introduces new actors, new costumes, new stage stuff, just a bunch of new stuff, which is fantastic. That's all I really need. The core game is already phenomenal. I can't wait to see what they do with Shakespeare Backstage. Then we've got Tavern's Tales, which is the next game from Krzysztof Matsucik, who last year put out Thrash and Roll, which was another one of my absolute favorite games of the year. I'm trying to remember, did Thrash and Roll make my top 10 of the year? It might have. I'd have to go back and look. Now, that was a very, very cool, clever dice worker placement game all about managing and developing a thrash metal band, which Jen and I just absolutely adored. We thought it was so phenomenal. And now in Tavern's Tales, Krzysztof is going after deck building. And it's basically set in a tavern. Your deck you're building up is a group of adventurers that you are trying to recruit, and you have more and more adventurers in your deck that you can use to recruit more adventurers, but you're also signing up to go and complete quests, which I believe are going to be your in-game bonus objectives, which you're trying to recruit those adventurers to be able to achieve. I don't really know too much about the gameplay yet. The art looks very bright and colorful and cartoony and very, very pleasing and charming. But, like I said, Krzysztof did such a phenomenal job with dice worker placement. I'm just really interested to see what he's going to do with deck building, and it's certainly got a very, very cool theme. So that will be very, very interesting coming this year. Tavern's Tales. Then we move on to Shadowscape, which is a new competitive dungeon crawl in the Mistfall universe. And Mistfall itself is a very, very cool cooperative sprawling, card-based adventure game that was very, very heavy, had lots of stuff going on. It was really, really cool. But Shadowscape, from the same designer as Mistfall, is a very, very different kind of game. I think from the description of it, it sounds like it's a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more simple, which is probably a good thing because, wow, Mistfall was kind of on the heavy edge of things in terms of complexity and being able to play. And what I'm really excited about this more than anything else, I love the description of this core central conceit. I've got my adventure character. I'm racing through this dungeon the same time you are. We're both trying to get out of there alive with the most treasure and avoid traps and all of that. But basically, we have a set of action cards laid out in front of us. And we can use those action cards to move or fight or explore or whatever. But the thing is, after I do, on my turn, after I do whichever those actions I want to do on those 4 cards, I flip that card over and I get rid of my access to that action and give myself access to a different action. And I just think that sounds like a really, really cool, simple, elegant thing. That, okay, I want to be able to do this right now, but I can't do it right now. And how can I do it? Well, I have to flip this other card, but I don't need to do that action right now. It sounds like a really, really cool idea. Very, very clever, and I expect it might work very well, especially because Mistfall itself was a really, really solid design. And that's why I'm very, very interested in Shadowscape from NSKN Games. Then we've got Pioneer Days, which once again is going to be potentially me cheating because apparently it's officially a 2017 game, but Tasty Minstrel often puts games on Kickstarter, and so if this one makes it onto Kickstarter, it would make sense. I'm just not sure if it's going to be. Basically, it is an Old West Oregon Trail Pioneer Simulation style game with dice drafting. Once again, another take on dice drafting, which, did I mention I love? And the interesting thing about this is every round you're trying to grab the dice to do whatever it is you're trying to do to keep your wagon train rolling and all that. Oh, excuse me. Oh, boy. Excuse me, folks, where was I? Here's a little pro tip. If you're ever going to do a podcast, don't have a spoonful of peanut butter right before you start recording and then just walk away and assume everything's going to be fine, because that's going to catch up with you. Anyway, what was I? Okay, Pioneer Days. Dice draft. Yes, oh yeah. So you're dice drafting, you're to do whatever actions you're going to do. I don't really know yet. But the cool thing is, apparently every round, not all dice will be taken, and the ones that aren't drafted are left behind and start to build up over time to contribute towards big looming disasters, I don't know, weather events and whatnot, that will slow you down. I think that actually sounds very, very cool. And then that, plus the fact that this is from one of the designers of Elysium, which was my second favorite, or maybe third favorite game of last year, plus it's from Tasty Minstrel Games, and those guys know what they're doing. They have very, very good taste, and they produce very, very high quality games. So all that combined means Pioneer Days is going to be phenomenal. The only question is, are we going to see it in some form on Kickstarter or whatnot this year? I'll be looking for it anyway. But then we move on to another 2017 game that I am confident will be on Kickstarter, Myth Dark Frontier, which might be surprising to some people considering how I kind of laid into Myth when I did the run-through for that a couple of years ago. But, you know, you have to remember, I thought the design of Myth itself was absolutely phenomenal, wonderfully designed game, so clever, so many really neat ideas. And it was just, you know, the production that kind of held it back. Now, since I have actually gotten my Myth 2.0 stuff, and I'm looking forward to trying it, just haven't been able to make the time, plus the voters haven't really pushed it very high up on the request list. It needs a lot more thumbs before it's going to get covered. But in the meantime, the same developers are bringing out Dark Frontier, which is a cooperative game. It's set in the same Myth universe, but basically, in this game, every day, players plan what actions they're going to be doing in the morning, the noon, and night. And they're kind of programming what they're going to do based on what they know the enemies they're going up against are going to be doing. And then all the plans they've made, all the cards they played to decide what their characters are going to do, get all shuffled up, and then you find out if it actually worked out well. That sounds like a really, really cool core concept. The universe itself, I know, is absolutely, very, very inviting and attractive, kind of a not quite cartoony, but not like dark and serious fantasy environment, the Myth universe. And again, these guys have great design chops, and I'm going to take it on faith that they've learned lessons from their earlier Kickstarter adventures, and this one will come out fully baked. And I can't wait to give it a try. So that is Myth Dark Frontier. Then we've got an expansion for Tiny Epic Galaxies, which is very exciting. Jen and I both, well, heck, seems like everybody loves Tiny Epic Galaxies, and with good reason. And so, with this new expansion, I think the thing I'm most excited about is, in addition to being able to launch your ships to go and take over alien planets and colonize them and whatnot, you can now also send your fleets out into the vast empty reaches of space in this kind of push your luck mechanism, which sounds really, really cool. And I'm sure there'll be lots of other neat things in it too. I mean, it's pretty much a gotta have it just because the core game is already so great. Although the interesting thing is, will it still be Tiny Epic if you need to have 2 boxes? Will everything fit in the one box? Time will tell. Then you got Perfect Crime. And this is actually a game that is on Kickstarter right now, which I gotta say, I am super stoked about, and I'm kind of bummed that the publishers never actually contacted me, Grublin Games, to do a run-through for it, because I definitely would have been into it, because their last game, Waggle Dance, I thought was an absolutely charming and delightful little bumblebee worker placement game with dice. It just worked so well. So I'm really, really interested in what their next game is, Perfect Crime, because the gameplay concept here is absolutely brilliant. It's an asymmetrical game, a one versus all, or where one player controls the bank, is actually designing the layout of a big city bank. You've got blueprints, and you're putting server rooms and security countermeasures in your vaults, and setting up patrol routes for your guards, and you're setting all this up. At the same time you're setting that up, the other players, which might just be one player or might be several players, the thieves are planning their heist, investing in all the high-tech gear they need, and working out what their point of entry is going to be and all that. And then after both sides have prepared, and the thing is, much like Stronghold from Stronghold Games and Portal Games, that the longer that the thieves take preparing for the heist, the more time the bank player gets to prepare their defenses. And then once the thieves come in, apparently the game plays out as some kind of tower defense thing. I don't know how it works, and it's like I said, it's kind of a shame because I don't think they have any gameplay videos up either, and I would have been all over that because I just love the idea of this so much. It sounds so cool. I think it'd really be up Jen's and my alley. It's called Perfect Crime. Again, you can go check it out on Kickstarter right now, this very day. Okay, next up we've got Order of the Gilded Compass. And this is very, very cool because this is the long-awaited reprint, retheme, redesign of Alia e Acta Est, which is a wonderful dice worker placement game, one of the first dice worker placement games for that matter. I did a run-through for quite a while ago, and we still have to this day, and I know people were really, really bummed when I did the run-through because, hey, how could I get this game? It's been out of print from Alia forever. Well, apparently, the designers, Bernd Eisenstein and Jeffrey Allers, is it Allmers or Allers? Let me look at that. Jeffrey Allers and Bernd Eisenstein, they got the rights back for the game. They've updated with a whole bunch of really cool ideas, completely rethemed it. It's no longer set in ancient Rome. Now it is kind of an Indiana Jones style archaeologist globe-trotting setting, but with the same core gameplay running the whole thing, and it's going to be published by Grey Fox Games. That just sounds so awesome. I'm so excited for these guys that they get to revisit a design that they'd had to put in their rearview mirror. They get to iterate upon it and improve upon it. It gets a whole fresh lick of paint, and I can't wait to find out more about the Order of the Gilded Compass because Alia Acta Est was just phenomenal. All right, next up we've got Fields of Green from Artipia Games. And this is interesting. This is from the designer of Among the Stars, which was a phenomenal card drafting game about building space stations in outer space. And then he followed that up with Dice City, which was a phenomenal game about building up cities and rolling dice and activating your. This guy, what's his name? Vangelis Bagiartakis. Sorry, Vangelis. A really, really sharp guy. This is his latest game. He's actually co-designing it with Konstantinos, the head guy of Artipia Games, who also designed the last year's excellent Project Elite, or is it this year's Project Elite? Anyway, these guys are getting together, and it's really interesting. because this is a 20th century farming simulation, which is so far outside of Artipia's wheelhouse. They always do these fantasy and science fiction settings. They have that really, really cool series of games set in that Clockwork universe. But this one is just very kind of grounded in sort of modern day farming reality, where you are doing card drafting again, kind of shades of Among the Stars, but kind of to build up a successful farm. More of it, it sounds to me, not that they've said this, but I mean, the way it reads to me, this is kind of a Seven Wonders meets Agricola kind of thing, which is very, very, very cool from a couple of guys who have designed a series of really, really rock solid games. So, as you can imagine, Field of Greens, I cannot wait to try this out. Unfortunately, Constantino's just contacted me a couple days ago and said, yeah, don't worry, I'll be sending you a prototype. So, I cannot wait to give that a try for when it goes on Kickstarter later in the year. Next up, this is an interesting one. Descent Journeys into the Dark Road to Legend is not a board game. It's an app that you can use on your smartphone or your tablet that enhances the board game Descent by changing that game so it is no longer an Overlord player playing against a bunch of adventurer players. Now the Overlord player is controlled by the app, by an artificial AI intelligence that makes decisions and runs over the bad guys. So Descent can become a 100% fully cooperative game. And I gotta say, that sounds phenomenal to me. I mean, I absolutely love the idea of new and interesting ways to bring digital elements into analog board games. And this is maybe an example of the best way to do that, to kind of simplify and streamline a heavy bookkeeping, because certainly Descent is a very, very heavy bookkeeping-ish kind of game, much more so than Jen and I normally care for. It's one of the reasons we didn't really enjoy it. But being able to now, Jen and I will be able to play that game together and go up against a thinking opponent, making interesting decisions. That gets me interested in Descent, which is something I thought would never happen again after our absolutely calamitous first attempt at that. So I cannot wait to try this out. I am super stoked about Descent Journey into the Dark Road to Legend, which I think it's actually available for download right now. I need to go check that out. But anyway, next up, we've got Rocky Road a la Mode, which is the next game from Green Couch Games. And I've thought the last couple games they did, Fidelitas and, what was it, the Treehouse game, the Best Little Treehouse. I thought those were both sweet, charming, really wonderful little light family gateway-ish type games. And that's what they're doing again, this time where players are running ice cream trucks. And if you know anything about me, you know I have got the biggest sweet tooth for ice cream in the universe. So I am immediately drawn to the subject matter. But that aside, the gameplay is what really pulls me in, because the entire game, it's a card game where you lay your cards out. Man, hold on a second. Sorry, folks. Throat dry. Anyway, it's a card game where you create a time track like Thebes or Glenmore or whatnot, and as you move your ice cream truck, and I guess this time track kind of represents the neighborhood, and so you can move your truck way far ahead, several blocks up ahead, to be able to get the ideal spot to sell all your ice cream, but then that means you're giving your opponent lots of opportunities to catch up. The time track is an absolutely phenomenal gameplay mechanism that doesn't get near enough love. It should really appear in a lot more games. And so, and I love the idea of this, a theme I really like. Probably a small, nice, portable game, and the entire game is about the time track. So all of that sounds really, really nice. I'm very, very excited for Rocky Road a la Mode. Then we've got the Pirate Republic. And now this is interesting. I have to admit, when I first heard about this, I kind of dismissed it out of hand. It's a big, sprawling, rollicking, a very down-to-earth, very grounded, very historically accurate, apparently, pirate simulation. This one isn't one that has releasing of the Kraken or undead pirates or anything like that. It's really much more about, the real pirate code and parlay that was true. I mean, apparently a lot of historical research has gone into this game, and what's really, really interesting about it, and so I heard all that and I thought, well, that sounds really cool, but man, it's probably not going to be the kind of game I like. It's probably going to be much more like a Merchants and Marauders style Ameritrash experience, which is the last thing Jen and I are interested, running around, attacking each other, and okay. But then I saw Undead Vikings video, because A Pirate Republic is on Kickstarter right now, and I actually, okay, what the heck, I'll give Lance a chance to sell me on it, and he totally did. Because as it happens, this game is, if you want to, can be played 100% cooperatively. And that is very exciting, because I grew up on a boat, 42-foot steel hull sailboat that my dad built. So, the allure of the open sea is one that pulls on me strongly, and it always has. And who doesn't like pirates? But, generally, all the pirate games out there are always very cutthroat affairs, kind of almost by necessity, because pirates are cutthroat. But here's one where players actually work together. And I gotta say, Lance's video made it look really, really good. So I have gone from total zero interest to this being very, very high on my watch list. Like I said, it's on Kickstarter right now if you want to go check it out. That is The Pirate Republic. Let's see, just a couple more now, folks. Deus Egypt, which is a very, very cool thing. It is the first expansion for Deus, which came out, in 2014, I think? And you may remember that Jen and I absolutely adored Deus. It probably would have been my number 2 or number 3 top-rated game of the year. Wonderfully brilliant card hand management system, area control expansion thing. I mean, it just worked so well. The multiple engines you were building, everything was just so phenomenal. The presentation, loved it so much, but ultimately had to send it away, had to trade it on, because for Jen's and my taste, it had too much player versus player stuff. Players stealing from each other, players trying to undercut each other, players trying to hopscotch over each other and block each other. A lot of people said, no, it's not that bad. But you know what, Jen and I we gave that game a lot. We loved it so much. I played it a half a dozen times, and we just couldn't do it anymore, because the better we got at it, the more cutthroat it became. Too much so for our Care Bear sensibilities. So I was always a heartbreaker. But with this first expansion, which introduces this whole Egyptian theme to it, well, that sounds really cool. But apparently there are 96 new cards, and these cards, and they come in the same color groups. They can replace the old cards, and and you can mix and match them. You can replace some of the old colors and some of the other colors. And so, what I'm excited for, what I'm hoping for, what my fingers are crossed is that this thing will allow, with certain ways that you can mix and match the old cards and the new cards, will allow to have a more Care Bear friendly live and let live. Look, I'm just trying to run my empire. You run your empire. Let's not butt heads on it, kind of thing. If it can provide that, I will be so thankful to have Deus back in my life. So I cannot wait to find out more about Deus Egypt. Then we've got Tiny Epic Quest. Designer Scott Alms and Gamelin Games are bringing us yet another Tiny Epic game. And I gotta say, these TE games are always wonderfully, cleverly designed little boxes of joy. Absolutely love Tiny Epic Defenders and Tiny Epic Galaxies, a phenomenal game. And so, Tiny Epic West was interesting. I thought it was a really, really solid design, but it just wasn't a good fit for me and Jen, but I really liked it. But anyway, Tiny Epic Quest is basically a high fantasy adventure game of traveling around the world and collecting resources and going on epic adventures and stuff like that in a tiny little epic footprint. So, what's not to love? And the game also features a very, very heavily implemented push your luck thing of how far are you going to push yourself as you go deeper and deeper and deeper and try to stay out in the wilderness longer and longer to collect more and more. I've just got the utmost faith in Gamelin Games, Michael Coe, and Scott Alms. They haven't let me down on any Tiny Epic game. Even when it wasn't one that was going to work for me and Jen, we still thought it was clever. We still thought it was innovative. And this one, there's no particular reason to think we're not going to enjoy this as much as we have Galaxy or Defenders. That is Tiny Epic Quest. And now, the last game I've got to talk about today, folks, is called Clank. Or I should say, Clank! And this is a deck building dungeon crawl game where players are all thieves competing to sneak around in the dungeon and pilfer the most loot without getting caught by the dragon. Sound familiar? Always a very, very nice setting. I am very confident of that. And a big focus of the game, like I said, is being stealthy, being sneaky, trying to avoid making loud clanking noises, which I can only assume is maybe those are going to be the junk cards you have in your deck. I don't know much about it. The main reason this went on my list is because it is from publisher Renegade Studios. And man, these guys at Renegade, I have been very, very impressed by their pedigree, by the designs they have been choosing to put out. They really seem to be on fire. They're a really strong up-and-comer. And, Clank, which is from a first-time designer, I think, still, just the fact that it's coming from Renegade is what pulls me in and gets me interested and makes me want to know more. That is Clank. And that is it, folks. I don't know what that was. Like 15 new games that all sound very cool, very exciting? Well, I think I'm going to take a breather right now because, man, I need some more water. I am out of practice. I take 2 weeks off from doing these podcasts. I just fall apart. My pipes. Tell you what, folks, I'm going to get some lubrication. I'll be right back. Hey everybody, okay, let us move on to revisiting my most recent top 10 topic, which was top 10 gameplay mechanisms, which, I have to admit, turned out to be such a bummer. I was so excited about that list. I put a lot of thought into it, and I really, really enjoyed thinking about it and talking about it, and I was really happy with the end result, and I put the video up, and then I just get buried under an avalanche of, just mechanism, or wordplay, all this kind of stuff of, because I happened to mention right up front that, yes, I call them mechanisms. When somebody says, I really like that gameplay mechanic, it just sounds weird to me, and some people, quite a few people, seem to think that was me personally attacking them and being completely out of touch with the fundamental function of language, and I was being pedantic, and it was just awful. For a few days after I put that video up, I so bitterly regretted ever even making it. It was such a huge bummer, because I just wanted to talk about the mechanisms. But all anybody wanted to do was go on about, it got to the point where there were so many people hitting me, I just actually wrote up and copied and pasted and just came up with a standard reply. Here's my reply. I posted this, I don't even know how many times, in how many different places and emails. Strictly speaking, mechanics is the study of how something works, while mechanisms are the individual processes by which it works, and a mechanic is someone who fixes those mechanisms. Over time, mechanics has taken on additional meanings to be the viable plural for both mechanism and mechanic, which are different things, which makes things muddy, as English is so often is. However, as I said in the vid, it's cool for anyone to use whichever term they like. No skin off my nose, smiley face. And I really hope that's the end of it. Because now, just thinking about it again, particularly because, like I said, people thought I was actually attacking others for using the word game mechanic. I don't care if you use the word game mechanic. Yes, it sounds wrong to me, but if you go back and listen to what I said, I specifically said, verbatim, yes, I'm one of those people. That was me mocking me, not mocking you. Whoever you are out there in the internet who was offended by me calling into question your use of language. I apologize you felt that way, but I was mocking myself and my own hang-ups. I don't care if you call it a game mechanic. That's great. It'll always sound wrong to me, but I know what you mean, so there's no harm, no foul. So anyway, sorry. Oh, man, it was just awful. I actually seriously thought about taking the video down. But anyway, it's all behind us now. Let's actually talk about gameplay mechanisms, which is a fun thing to talk about instead of word wars. And, it's interesting. Probably the single biggest thing that got asked over and over and over again, where is worker placement? Why didn't you list worker placement? I kind of did because I hedged my bets and had dice worker placement, kind of, sort of, but not really. But why isn't worker placement, arguably the most popular, widespread well-loved Euro gameplay mechanism out there. Why didn't it make my top 10? And I have to admit that I would probably have to do a lot more soul searching to find that out. I am equally surprised with this as I am when a while ago I did my top 10 must-have games and not a single worker placement game made that list. Don't get me wrong, I love worker placement. I enjoy a lot of worker placement games. My number 2 game of all time, Agricola, is a worker placement game. Although, to be fair, Agricola doesn't make my top 10, my top 5, my top 2 because of the worker placedness. I mean, the worker placedness is fine, but what makes that game for me is the cards, the long-term planning, having to work out an overall strategy when you first sit down for 10 minutes and try to figure out what cards you're going to use and then make that strategy play out to the best of your ability. That's what puts Agricola so high for me, not the worker placement, which is why it didn't make my top 10 worker placement game list when I did that a long time ago either, and that really ticked off a few people as well. But yeah, why? I like it. I guess I would even say I love worker placement games. But man, to really get my attention, vanilla worker placement doesn't do it. I guess maybe it is overplayed. Maybe there's just too much of it. Because to really get me excited about a worker placement game, you've got to do something really cool with it. Like bumping, like using dice, like workers who have special, attributes. I've got scientist workers and engineer workers, and they do different things. Like workers that have values that define how much they do when you place them in different things, like workers who can evolve over time. There's a lot of things you can do to really pump up worker placement. And the thing is, I guess when I sat down and thought about it, and I thought about the worker placement games I really love, just worker placement alone isn't enough. Just having your little squad of dudes who you send out there into the world. And don't get me wrong, I understand why people love worker placement so much, because the thing that really strikes me about it is it's a gameplay mechanism that allows you to feel like you actually have some kind of personal projection into the world. Yes, I myself, like most Euro games, which are all at their heart economic simulations where you are some nameless virtual middleman who is pulling strings to manipulate economies. That's pretty much what Euro games are. And, for a lot of thematic gamers out there, for Eurotrash fans out there, they find it very, very off-putting to not feel like, no, that's me. I have to be in this world. I have to be moving around. Worker placement is a great way to bridge that gap because, yeah, I myself might not be in there, but that's my little crew of dudes. And I'm moving them around and I'm doing something and I now feel connected to the world. So I totally get why that is an attractive and important and meaningful gameplay mechanism for me. But for me, it's just like, yeah, it's nice. It's good. It works. But you really got to pour a lot of secret sauce on it to get me excited. And because of that, I just couldn't, in good conscience, make it into my top 10. And so that's why, and like I said, that was when people weren't, calling me whatever they wanted to call me about the use of the word mechanic versus mechanism. That was the number one asked question. Where was worker placement? Variable player powers was another one. I thought about that, and that was another one that surprised me too, when I realized I really didn't need that to have a really, really great game experience. I mean, I love variable player powers. I love the variety it adds to setup and all that, but it's just not something that I need. It's something that I like, but it's not something that makes me say, oh my gosh, I must play this game. Unlike, pretty much the top 10 things I did actually talk about. Those were all things, the simultaneous action selection, card drafting, dice drafting, and those are things that get me really excited, that pull me in. And variable player powers doesn't. Auctions, same thing. There are so many great auctions. Someday I'm going to do a top 10 great auction games, which they'll all be working well for 2 players. Really enjoy auctions, but just not enough. And then this was actually surprised me. Several people asked, what about Legacy as a gameplay mechanism? Why didn't you mention Legacy as one of your favorite gameplay mechanisms? Well, the answer to that is because I don't really think of it as a mechanism. To me, that's more of a game feature. The gameplay mechanisms of Pandemic are multi-use cards, resetting event decks, resource management, stuff like that. Those are the mechanisms in Pandemic Legacy. The Legacy portion is not an actual gameplay. That is a meta consideration. That is something that happens outside the game that, twists and manipulates the game. It adds an incredible sense of connection and importance and gravitas to every step you take, every move you make. But though it's not the actual mechanisms you use to take those steps and make those moves. So while I absolutely love it, I mean, that would have to go under like top 10 features of a game that I would really love. So that's pretty much it. Next top 10 topic that I'll be revisiting will be my top 10 two-player only games. And I got to say, I already filmed the video for it. It'll be going up in a couple days now, I think, if I recall correctly. Yeah. And that was a really tough one to do. There were so many heartbreaking games, so many games I wanted to put on that list that I just couldn't. So I'm looking forward next month to revisiting it. And heck, maybe I'll talk about my next top 10 because there were so many that deserve so much cool credit. But anyway, folks, that's it. Revisiting the top 10 gameplay mechanisms topic. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. If you hold on, we'll be right back with Jen for the monthly Q&A. Okay, everybody, time for the questions and answers. And as always, please feel free to send any questions to questions@rahdo.com. I appreciate lots and lots of questions because I'll be honest, you're just making my life easier. I don't have to come up with lots of interesting segments for the show if you just ask enough questions every month. So Jen and I can just sit down on the couch and relax and talk about stuff, because that's just kind of ideal. So remember, questions to questions@rahdo.com, and don't forget to throw a few in for Jen every once in a while, because as it turns out, for the most part, these tend to be kind of Rahdo-centric, and Jen's here to answer questions, but we'll see how it goes. And, they can be about games, they can be about life, they can be about anything. And as we started doing in the last podcast, we're going to do all the game-related questions that came in up front. And then after all that's over, we will then go on ahead and skip ahead. Or the final section will be non-game related stuff, so that people who don't care about non-game related opinions that Jen or I might have can bid us adieu. So, Honey Pie, are you prepared?
I am prepared.
All righty, then let's start with our first question from Justin. Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Actually, this question came in last time, and it was a big, gigantic wall of text. And I'm like, I can't read that right now. Justin, I'll get to you next. And here I am. And once again,
Are you
showing
confronted with the
my...
big wall of text?
Mm-hmm.
Did
Let's
you look
see.
at it before you started?
Honey Pie, why don't you tell them what you're doing right now and fill for a little bit. And I'm actually going to read Justin's email really quick.
All right. Well, I am actually threading not all of them, about 50, not all at once, of course, of the dice bags that my mom lovingly crocheted as part of the Rahdo rewards for the Kickstarter. And so I thought I could do that fairly quietly while I sat here and thought about whatever kinds of questions you people might be asking us. So that is what I'm doing, and it is good fun. And it's nice. It's nice to touch the things that my mom made and, kind of co-create with her. So I am just as happy as a clam. Was that enough filling?
It's a long email.
Oh, dear. I don't know why he didn't read that ahead.
I should have read it ahead. I've got a pause button right here. Okay, folks, I'm going to be right back with Justin's question.
Okay.
Okay, and we're back. And I have now successfully made it through Justin's epic tome, which he ended with, "Thanks for taking the time to read this giant wall of text, Justin." I have made good on my promise. And buried amongst all of this was a question about the relative gameplay experience that video games provide as opposed to board games or traditional pen and paper role-playing games. Because his observation was that traditional role-playing games, Dungeons & Dragons-y type stuff, provides an experience that really none of the other contemporaries can resolve, because you have a real human storyteller who is crafting a rich and evocative world right there in front of you. It's a collaborative exercise, and and so that's its own separate thing. That's kind of on the mountaintop, the ultimate in fantasy adventure experience. And then on the other end, you've got modern board games that don't really have a lot of the strong storytelling, but they sacrifice that for much richer and more interesting and engaging actual gameplay mechanisms, which is certainly true. Most pen and paper role-playing games, it is all about, well, I'm going to roll the d20 against my agility to see if I climb the slope, and that's just kind of the minutia. Those are the raw technical bits you got to get through to get to the heart of what makes those things exciting. The cool and interesting story. And but there's an interesting thing going on, and he uses Gloomhaven as a specific example of board games that are trying to hybridize and capture more and more of that pen and paper storytelling experience. The big, expansive worlds, the characters who you can level up for months or even years at a time, the elaborate combat systems and all of that. And in doing that, they are kind of moving away from the strengths of what a strong board game is, especially a Euro that Justin mentioned, because obviously he's a Euro player like me and Jen. And they're becoming closer and closer to what a video game like Skyrim or Knights of the Old Republic might offer. And his question is, why would he even play a game like Gloomhaven when I can turn on my PlayStation 4 and get all of those features, but multiplied 100 times by having the dirty upkeep and rule monitoring taken care of by a computer? I just don't see the point. And so really his question is, about this trend towards bigger, because it's not just Gloomhaven. Obviously you got your Descent, you got your Mice and Mystics, you've got Sword and Sorcery, you've got Galaxy Defender, you've got that new Warhammer Tower game, the Silver Tower. You've got a lot of games, these big box, tons of minis, epic fantasy adventure games, and they really do kind of capture a lot of the same je ne sais quoi of a video game, from Bethesda, in the Elder Scrolls series or something like that. Why play a board game if it's abandoning what makes it strong when a video game can do it so much better? Honey Pie, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes.
Okay.
I do have actually a thought, and the reason you would do it is.
And Jen, by the way, I didn't read that to her at all. This is just off the cuff. Jen has lifted up her glasses.
Oh dear.
Because, by the way, we're both old now and we have to use reading glasses. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Well, what happened to us?
Well,
but anyway.
It's good to be able to see.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Actually, we just came back from Istanbul and we were in Istanbul trying to read little things on various stuff, and we didn't bring the reading glasses with us, and we thought, oh dear, we've reached that point where actually not only do we need reading glasses, we actually need them.
Yeah.
To read.
As opposed to them just being kind of nice to have.
Yeah.
But
anyway.
We're talking about games.
Yes, I've just put my reading glasses up on my forehead. Since I'm looking at my husband talking to him, and I can see him perfectly well. The thing that I was going to say about the question is that the reason you'd want to play that board game as opposed to video game is still for the experience of sitting across the table, looking at somebody, seeing their reactions, and having that shared experience. I just don't think that you really get that with video games. I don't think it's possible. Even with a headset on, even talking to them directly, you're not seeing facial expressions.
What about even sitting on the same couch?
Playing the same game?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've done that loads of times, but still your attention is at the TV, isn't it?
Yes.
It's not at your co-player.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my response.
That would have been my response too. You have saved me the trouble. That's what it is. Wow. I mean, there are things that video games do wonderfully. And I don't mean to, heck, the last major game I worked on, Brink, was a game all about, it was basically a big social experiment in kind of a shooter form, a game that ostensibly intended to turn multiplayer first-person shooter gamers into, single-player first-person shooter fans into multiplayer first-person shooter fans. Which is a whole, and it's apparently hard to say. But anyway, yeah, Jen nailed it. It's about the human connection. That's something that video games can't do. Even when you're playing a game like Cookies and Cream, and we're sitting on the table together. On the couch together. Heck, even Cookies and Cream, when we had to share the same controller, it's just not the same. Because of the real-time nature of video games and the go-go now, there's certain upsides to that. It pulls you in. It's evocative. You can lose yourself in these worlds. as they become more visually high fidelity. It's as they get closer and closer to finally smashing through Uncanny Valley. It's incredible what we are able to create these days in the video game format, but it always is moving further and further away from that human connection. And of course, that human connection is what you talked about that is so wonderful and lovely and untouchable for a pen and paper. When you have a real strong storyteller, weaving exciting tales of adventure and you living through those, that's all about human connection. And while it's true that a Gloomhaven cannot replicate what a good dungeon master does for you, it does still create interesting and memorable and meaningful stories because of our shared trials and tribulations as we try to make it out of whatever dungeon alive that we might have been trying to go through. We are still sharing those experiences, and we spend just as much time, as Jen said, looking in each other's eyes as we do looking at the table. And that's what makes it special. Now, totally as an aside, you got to check out Gloomhaven, dude, because I think you've got the wrong end of the stick. It is not. I mean, I get what you're saying about, the tedious and the odious bookkeeping and, the 1.5 million little persnickety rules and all the stuff that kind of typifies these hybridized board games, as you call them. I totally get that, and that's a turnoff for me and Jen as well. The beautiful thing about Gloomhaven is it's a euro in Ameritrash clothing. Much like Legends of Andor before it, this is a brilliant card-driven hand management system that drives all the action. It's a wonderfully designed thing. I mean, even if it didn't have all the legacy or the big epic storytelling and all that stuff, just the core gameplay was so good. I mean, you got to check it out. But that's totally as an aside. But thank you, Justin, for your very well-composed and very thought-provoking question. And my apologies, it took so long to get to it. Perhaps next time you'll write a shorter one. But now, let's move on to new stuff. And Eric. Oh, I remember this. Eric asks, what are your favorite TV shows? What are your favorite songs and bands? Thanks, and keep up the good work. This actually kind of came up on the Rahdo Runs Through Guild because we were talking about, hey, how come the voters never have me do top 10 topics that aren't game related when they come up in the votes, and people just don't want it. And I always said, well, hey, but if you ask me a question, I can always do it in the podcast. And so Eric has made good on that. Well, we'll come back to that in a second, Eric. Well, actually, to be honest, we have talked quite a bit in recent podcasts about songs and bands. And I think we've kind of talked a bit about TV. Well, we'll come back to that in the last section. Let's move on to Rob. Rob also has a non-game related question, so we'll come back to that also. Now let's move on to Ricky Royal of Box of Delights. Folks, if you like Rahdo Runs Through, but you think there's not enough English accent, you really need to go check out Box of Delights on YouTube. Ricky does a really great video series. He runs through games like I do. He puts a lot more work into it than I do too. He's a great guy, and he's British, and he deserves more viewers. But anyway, Ricky wrote the question: Did you have any hopes, dreams, or aspirations when you sat down and recorded that first video? Was this a simple hobby? Has this simple hobby thrown an unexpected curveball at you? Ricky, I will not lie. I believe I've admitted this freely in the past. Yeah, I picked up the camera because I was kind of hoping it would lead to free games. I'll say it. I'll be honest. Because the situation was, I had quit my job. And I was done working, although it turned out I wasn't, but I thought I was at the time.
You hoped that you were.
I certainly hoped that we were going to go for that early retirement plan that Jen and I had been talking about and working very, very hard on since our 20s to retire by our mid-40s. And, we're going to do it now, gosh darn it.
Well, we certainly could have if we hadn't lived in England, which is very expensive.
Yes, that's the problem. More importantly, Ricky will understand, we lived in Guildford, which means we might have well been living in downtown London. So
Downtown.
Yeah, I know there is no downtown. Yes,
whatever.
Yeah. But anyway, so in theory it worked on paper. Jen had done the numbers. In theory, it might have worked, but it was very nerve-wracking. But one thing was definitely for sure: we were done buying board games. Too expensive, couldn't do it. And I'm like, well, I guess that's okay. But man, I still like board games, and Tom Vassell gets free board games maybe I could too. And yeah, I totally, I mean, that's not entirely true. I mean, it had been something I had been thinking about. Plus, I'd been thinking, oh, look, if I'm going to be retired, I need a hobby. And, while I would love to say just playing the board games is my hobby, I don't know if that would work because Jen's not willing to put as much time into it as I am. I mean, I'll happily play 5 games a day, but Jen likes to do other stuff as it happens.
Jen likes to make things.
Yes, and whereas me, I just like to play things. So I thought, well, you know what? It'd probably be something fun to do too. It looks like fun. Why not give it a try? But yeah, I was totally, I was totally mercenary, and it's worked out. I've got a fairly popular show. I still, at this point, have to buy about half the games that I run through, but. Fortunately, the fans of the show make that possible, and I say once again, thanks to everybody for helping make our dreams come true.
Yeah.
And thanks for asking, Ricky. So now we move on to Ed, who noted that I mentioned that I had participated in voting for the Dice Tower Awards a couple of years ago. Why did I stop? Ed would like to know. He's just curious. Well, there were a couple of things that kind of bugged me. One, at that time, the whole process was run through Yahoo groups, and I don't know if you've ever used Yahoo groups, but oh my gosh, it's terrible. It has got an iTunes level of epically poor user interface decisions that just makes it practically unusable. It was just so atrocious, and I went in thinking, wow, this is going to be so much fun doing behind the scenes arguing and debating, and we're going to be, and I'm going to fight my corner, and I'm going to make the Dice Tower Awards more Eurocentric, and I'm going to fight the fight. And I got there, and nobody seemed to be interested to even talk about it. Everybody just, oh, well, I nominate this. And I'm like, yeah, but let's talk about it. Like, whatever. I'll vote. And I'm like, oh, well, this isn't very much fun. Now, as it turns out, I don't think that was necessarily a reflection of the people who were involved behind the scenes. It was a reflection of that really, really gosh-awful, terrible Yahoo Groups interface that just made any sort of conversation just like pulling teeth. So I was kind of bummed by that. But then the other problem was Tom has this voting system instituted, which really rubbed me the wrong way. I did not care for it at all because, we finally had our final nominations. We all had to make our votes. And so I sent in my votes and I said, okay, this is the one for best game of the year. This is the one for best family game of the year, which, by the way, officially is Gateway Game of the Year. That's another thing that drives me nuts, that Tom refuses to actually identify his own personal descriptions for what all those categories means. Even though he has them in his head, he never really comes out and says, oh, right, in his head, family is synonymous with Gateway. He just doesn't use Gateway because he's thinking family looks better on a sticker that might get put on the box. So there's that stuff that just drives me nuts. And if I can't do it the way I want to do it, I just don't want to be around it. So there was that as well. But he has this thing where, okay, I voted, and I voted, yeah, this is the best of this. From the choices I have, this is the best of this, the best of this. And he wrote back saying, well, you should really pick your favorite 3. Like, why? Of this list, this is the best one. And he said, well, if you don't pick 3, it's actually gonna knock your standings down. You really need to pick 3. I'm like, but I don't want to pick 3. I don't want to contribute to one that I don't think is the best. And we kind of went back and forth on it for a bit, and he couldn't convince me, and I couldn't convince him. And honestly, it left such a bad taste in my mouth. And again, it's nothing against Tom. It's nothing against the people who were involved. It's just like, I was like, this is not what I was hoping for. I don't really like I don't like some of these decisions. Nobody's arguing, and we're not having debates. It's just, so I just said, oh, well, thanks. It was nice. And then I just opted not to go back next year. Now, my understanding is since then they have switched over to Facebook, and now apparently there are what I was hoping for, the big, raucous, rollicking, you're crazy, that isn't that, this is that and the other thing. Whereas when I was trying to do it, I think I just kind of annoyed everybody. Now there's a bigger group of people and they're willing to do that. So I thought about going back, but then I remember I don't believe he's changed his voting system, and I so fundamentally, deeply disagree with it that I just know it would tick me off. So I just haven't gone back. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a great what the Dice Tower Awards are, bringing shining a spotlight on games and all that. But yeah, I just haven't gone back. Okay, Jason Honeypie has a couple of questions. Have we played Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation, and what are our thoughts? Yes, Jason, we have. And unfortunately, I bet you Jen doesn't even remember. We played this back in England. It was Lord of the Rings. We sat down, and it was a little tiny board. Kind of like Stratego, if you remember Stratego, but with Lord of the Rings, because I've got my characters, and I've got the hobbits and Boromir and Legolas, and I'm trying to move them forward, and you are a bunch of orcs and Uruk-hai and stuff, and and the Witch King and all that, and you're trying to move yours around, but all I can see is, I can see your pieces, but I don't know which piece you're moving.
Yeah.
And is that just a goblin, or is that the Witch King of Angmar? I don't know. If I move up, and meanwhile you're looking, well, is that Frodo, who I have to actually get, or is that just some other hobbit that I don't care about? And I'll be honest, Jason, I thought it was really clever. I liked it a lot. Apparently Jen remembers it because she just said, oh, yes. I don't know if Jen remembers that she hated it.
Oh.
You just did not like it at all.
I think actually I was probably the hobbits and stuff, and you were probably the bad guys.
We played it both ways.
Oh.
The first time we played it, I was Sauron, and you were Gandalf, effectively, or you were the forces of good, and I was forces of evil, and I just totally smoked you. And you're like, this game is crap. It's unbeatable. There was no chance I had. I'm like, no, honey, I just don't think you're quite getting the rhythm. And then we swapped, and I played the good guys, and you played the bad guys, and I smoked you again. And then...
Well, no wonder you liked it. That was great.
But yeah, I thought it was just really clever, too.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, you just did not respond well to it at all.
I think I don't like my men in peril. I don't like things that put my pieces in peril. I don't want to lose my castles and my things that I've built up. And I certainly don't want to lose I don't even like that game where the guys die at the end and you have to decide who dies. So it was probably, now, looking back with more experience, it was probably something along that line that I always felt that my guys were in peril. Because, of course, I knew where my guys were. And I always felt that, I'm going to lose him. I can't lose him. And then I feel paralyzed by fear.
Yeah.
And I imagine it was a lot of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are other player versus player games we play. I really do think that's probably what it comes down to more than anything else. Because the player versus player games we do tend to enjoy, few and far, duels, sitting down opposite from each other, staring each other in the eye and saying, right, I will destroy your forces now. Very few of those we like. Yeah. And really, I do think more than anything else, that's what it came down to. Now, the interesting thing about it is, the game is... it's almost checkers-like, and the confrontation isn't really quite that intense. It's really more about the bluffing and trying to suss out, right, is he going left or right? It's a really clever game. I liked it a lot, which is saying something for me too, because I liked it. I think in spite of its player versus player, just because it was so clever. And Jen she just had like a almost violently allergic reaction to it. But anyway, those are our thoughts. What is, in your opinion, the best Lord of the Rings / Hobbit themed board game that isn't a trading card game, living card game, or collectible card game? Well, obviously I know what you're talking about there, because the answer is yes, Lord of the Rings, the living card game. From Fantasy Flight, that game is phenomenal. It's probably a bit too top-heavy for its own good, too many little persnickety rules. I would love to see it kind of get a Euro streamlinification, but still, it's a phenomenal game, but you're leaving those out. Well, we would have to leave out War of the Ring, because Jen and I just don't have an interest in some big epic war game. If Jen didn't like a little tiny Stratego-like war game, she's certainly not going to like War of the Ring, and I know I wouldn't either. Well, let's see. Middle-earth Quest is pretty cool. If Middle-earth Quest were able to be played in half the time, I'd probably go with that, but it's just too long. It's just too long. Can't do it. You know what? You know what I'm going to say, Jason? And a lot of people are going to disagree with me. A lot of people are going to call me crazy, loco in the cabeza. I'm going to say Lord of the Rings, the dice building game from WizKids, which had an epically botched launch. There must be a really interesting story, because that game should have, it was a follow-up to Quarriors before Dice Masters came out, using the Quarrior system before Dice Masters did. Had the Lord of the Rings license. It was a highly produced game, really good-looking dice, a wonderful tray to hold all those dice, and really, really high. Eric Lang and Mike Wilson worked on it. I think some other people did. So a big design pedigree, and WizKids just pretty much just dumped it on the market, no fanfare, let's say, less than ideal, an incomplete rule book, let's say, and just let it wither and rot on the vine. But I thought it was really, really clever. And the only reason we didn't keep it was because at its heart, for it to play well, you had to play it as a semi-co-op, and Jen just doesn't like semi-co-op. She would like to co-op or compete and not, play the... but that's what I thought was so brilliant about it, is that as a game, it truly captured, probably more than any other Lord of the Rings property ever, except for maybe some pen and paper game, the notion of corruption. Because it was a game that it wasn't about your characters being corrupted, it was about you as a player being corrupted. Wanting to make a grab for power, because even though we're all in it together, we all have to be the free folk fighting against Sauron. There's only one MVP, true winner, and so sometimes you have to decide, I'm going to put my own score above the needs of the group. And I thought that was brilliant because that's an implicitly corrupt action. But the game, sets up the rules that is a requirement. And so it was so brilliant. But still, Jen just didn't, because Jen doesn't like semi-co-ops. And a lot of people don't like semi-co-ops, so we got rid of it. But my understanding is they subsequently released full cooperative rules. And I really do want to go back and try it again someday and see how, because I think I could certainly see how it would work as a full co-op as well. Because the raw mechanisms were great. It was a bag builder. Before Orleans, so that's what I'm going to go with. Although it's based on the supposition that the co-op game is as good as the semi-co-op, because the semi-co-op was great. So, Jen, Honey Pie, I assume you have nothing to say to that. Nothing?
Nothing.
Alrighty. Well then, Jason also asks, what are your top 10 auction games? Someday, Jason, that will get covered in a video, and then I'll come back in the podcast and do a follow-up on it. But in the meantime, it's easy enough to find out. Just go to games.rahdo.com. You'll see 400 games ranked, and you can just start going from top to bottom and spot the auction games. I think my number one, if I recall correctly, is Peloponnese. Spoiler alert. So, and Jason is back for more. Jason had 3 back-to-back emails. Have you ever been to see... Nope, okay, that's right. That is a non-game. We'll come back to that one later. As is that one. We'll come back to that one later. From Priscilla. Okay, Alex says... Alex wonders what my thoughts are on the impact Kickstarter has on brick and mortar stores. What is my opinion? I'm sure you've got one. Really? Me? Go figure. On how companies are using Kickstarter and thus effectively selling directly to customers and bypassing the retail chain, especially as the Kickstarter buyer is generally the alpha gamer whose business is often a core part of the FLGS, the Friendly Local Game Store. Well, Alex, I'm glad you asked. Because, yes, I do have an opinion, and I'm going to have to say I disagree with you, that last sentence. I think, as I have said before, Kickstarter is full of awesome sauce. It is absolutely wonderful. It is an amazing platform to make dreams come true, to defray risk, or to ameliorate risk, defray costs. I think everybody should be using it. And I do not believe it to be a detriment to brick and mortar stores. Based on my understanding of the reality of friendly local game stores. Because you say that Kickstarter buyers are alpha gamers, and those are the people who keep brick and mortar stores in business. My understanding is that is wholly incorrect. That it is casual business. It is people breaking into the industry. It is people who know nothing about board games. I'm sorry, I don't mean that. Who know they like board games. They played it with friends. They've heard about it in some newspaper article. They stumbled across Will Wheaton's tabletop show, and they're like, hey, these board games are pretty cool. I'm gonna go buy me some of those. Hey, here's a local friendly game store. They'll be able to help me with that. That is the casual board game fan who does not go to Board Game Geek, who does not watch Kick Track and make sure they keep up to date with all the latest stuff that's on Kickstarter, who does not buy online. Those are the people who keep friendly local game stores in business. If you are somebody who is predisposed to back a game on Kickstarter to get it early, then you were never going to buy that game at a brick and mortar store anyway. If you couldn't get it through Kickstarter, you were going to get it through Cool Stuff Inc. or Miniature Market or Amazon or or eBay, because you are, as you said, a true alpha gamer, and those alpha gamers do not generate the vast majority of revenue for successful brick and mortar stores, because there simply are not enough of them, and too many of those alpha gamers are too cheap because they're buying too many games and they can't pay full retail, and so they're doing their big orders where, hey, if you spend over 100 you get free shipping. So that's the type of person who isn't keeping a friendly local game store in business, and that's also the type of person who's going to back a Kickstarter campaign because they can't wait. They want to be one of the first people to get it because they've got to have all the special limited edition promos and whatnot. So if I am in fact correct on that, and that is my understanding, having talked to people who are in the know on this subject, publishers and game store owners, if that is in fact correct, although I have a limited sample set, but it makes sense to me based on my observations of how players work, then Kickstarter only helps friendly local game stores because it allows for the creation of more games that would never see the light of day under any other circumstance, and it gives friendly local game stores the opportunity to have more wares to put on their shelves to sell. Now, it's still on the friendly local game store to actually stock the right stuff and not just buy blind. And that's why you've got great people out there like MaggieBot who spend a lot of time studying the market, so they make sure they But that's like a whole nother topic of conversation. But anyway, that's, I guess, is my feeling. Honey, do you have anything to add to that? I would be shocked if you do, but you might.
No, I don't think so. Okay,
then let's move on to Joshua's question. Which has been asked before. Given my background as a video game designer and my extensive knowledge of board game mechanics, do you see yourself ever designing a board game? Why haven't you already? Josh, go to FAQ. This gets asked so often. Go to faq.rahdo.com. You will find the answer there. Jen! Josh says Jen.
Oh, I thought it was
Would
Jen.
you be for or against Rahdo designing a board game?
I like my husband happy, so if he doesn't want to do it, I do not want him to have to do it.
Okay. And then Josh adds in closing, thank you, and I hope one day to hear the rest of the Nintendo story.
I guess he'll have to corner you at a show.
All righty. Let's move on to Mark's questions. Mark has a couple of questions. Congratulations on another year of Rahdo runs through. Thanks, Mark.
Yay.
Question number one, which Kingdom Builder expansion do you prefer and why? Any you dislike? You know what, Mark? I would love to answer that question in all honesty, but the reality is, we haven't played Kingdom Builder since I did the run-through for it. The reality is, at this point in my Rahdo runs-through career, I don't play any game that I'm not going to do a run-through for. So while I have all but the most recent Kingdom Builder expansion, I haven't picked that one up because I love Kingdom Builder a lot. I think it's an absolutely brilliant game, and I am still shocked how many people just totally miss the boat on it. It's such a wonderful, lovely, smart design, and I would love to try out all these expansions. So far, they don't seem to get very many thumbs on the request list, which means they don't move up very high, which means they don't get voted on, which means they're not going to get covered anytime soon. The other reason they won't is because, for whatever reasons, Queen's Game just doesn't want to give me the time of day. And so I have to buy any Queen game myself, which means I tend to prioritize in my run-through queue, one, Kickstarter games, because they have they've got a timer, a shelf life. You've got to get hit by that date for them to actually be useful for viewers who like those videos. Then number two, games that were sent to me as review copies. Because I just think it would be rude to some publisher who sent me a game, they had to incur the cost of shipping, and these days I don't take on the cost of import duty, so they have to pay the import tax because, man, that just adds up so fast. So for them to go through all that, I feel it would be rude of me not to prioritize their game higher than a game that I bought for myself. And so, and then number three beyond that would be games that I did buy only because the Rahdo runs-through voters requested. So that's like my third tier. And so then distant fourth tier is games that I just happen to like. And somewhere in there is the actual monthly votes, of course, as well. But that's 4 games every month of the 15 or 20 games I film. So because of that circumstance, I haven't gotten to play any of them. I don't think. Maybe I don't think I have. So I can't answer. But man, I'd love to. But that's not going to happen until, at the rate I'm going, that'll happen the day Rahdo Runs Through ends. Kingdom Builder will scream to the top of, man, I remember how much I love this game now. I can play it because I'm not playing every new game under the sun. Alrighty. But Mark's second question, when playing Orleans with the expansion, do you still remove half the buildings? Oh, yes. Or rather, see previous question. If I were playing Orleans, with the expansion. No, actually, I didn't actually complain about that. That is kind of a bummer. The way that the expansions are set up is that you have to have that very specific combination of cards. And that did I probably should have mentioned that in the video. That would have been my one, but I was just so enamored of that co-op, the invasion thing. It's just so well done. But it does kind of bug me that Reiner, the designer of it, just isn't really interested in variable setups. And so all of that stuff was, there's nothing variable about it. Every time you sit down and play the co-op, you have access to the exact same stuff. It starts out pretty much the same way every time. And that'd be fine for a couple more games, but I think if I were to get into it much more than that, I would have to come up with another variant for it, which kind of bugs me. But see your earlier question, that's not going to happen because we haven't played Orleans Invasion since I did the run-through. We played it a few times, we really enjoyed it, thought it was great, did the run-through, and then we moved on. Like sharks, like board game sharks. Alrighty, Brendan asks, what are some of the most important features of a great rulebook? Yeah, honey pie. Have you read any board game rulebook ever?
Nope.
Nope. All right, well, that was a one for me. Do's and don'ts on board game rulebooks. Probably, it's a stupid little thing, but it's shocking to me how many times they mess this up. Single most important thing, the last page of your rulebook, the back cover of your rulebook is your friend. That should be, in every game, a nice full-page summary of all the important stuff you need to be able to spot check while playing. And I am shocked, I tell you, Brendan, at the ridiculous quantity of manuals that don't understand this. Nothing's worse than seeing, here's the back cover, and there's just nothing but some art. Or just some copyright notice that's completely blank. It's like, you just wasted a whole page of great turn, game summary stuff. Lots of other times, they just, you know what? On the last page, we just happened to wrap up the last little bit, and there's half the information from the previous page. Oh, that is just such epically terrible layout. Such wasted space. That drives me nuts. The biggest mistake, that's the biggest mistake when they mess that up. The second biggest mistake that board game rulebook writers make, and I'm shocked how much they make it, is the, what's a good example of it? Space Hulk Death Angel is a good example of it. And in fact, I would say anytime you have a board game rulebook that everybody universally despises, I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, they will have made this mistake. The overall structure of the rulebook will be, let's spend the first 3 or 4 minutes defining every term in the game. Defining how every single thing works without any actual context of the game itself. And let's not actually start telling you how to even set up the game, let alone what the game structure is, until we get halfway through. Let's make you wade through 3 pages of, this is a blah blah card. It does this, this, and this. This is this token. It is used for X, Y, and Z. Don't tell me all this stuff now. I have no contextual understanding of the game that lets me file this away in such a way that I will be able to recall this information later. This is just this is an info dump. Oh my gosh, Phil Eklund is terrible at this. Now I understand why, because my background is in scientific and technical communication. In college, I was being trained to write technical manuals for engineers. So I understand this is kind of a standard. This is the way it's been done forever, old style war game manuals and whatnot. But it's so counterintuitive. It is such a break from how people actually learn. The way you set up a rule book is page 1, Here's the setting. Here's who you are. Here's what you're trying to do. Ground, and this is how you teach a game as well. Ground a player's immediate understanding in thematic terms that will help them interpret everything they hear afterwards. Page 2 and page 3, here's how you set up the game. And tell them, set up the game right now. Don't read the rest of the rulebook. Set up the game right now. Now that you have actually touched all these things and you have put them in the correct place on the table, not only do you have a thematic understanding, you have a tactile understanding. Now, page 4. Define for me the overall structure of how a game round, a game turn, whatever you want to call it, works. I mean, a lot of people say, tell me how to win the game. Yeah, that's great too, but honestly, I don't even care about that because I don't need to know that right now. I need to know, the structure. And then for the rest of the, I guess tell me how you win as well. Or that could have been on the first page. I'm less worried about that. I know it's a really big bugaboo for others, and it's important, but you know what, how you win most games? Earn the most victory points. That's generally what it comes down to. Or kill your enemy. That's pretty much, it's one or the other. Kill your enemies or earn the most points. I don't know that it really is that important. But the thematic, actually it is important because when I say first page, ground the thing thematically, you got to say, who are we? What are we trying to do? What is our goal? We're business managers. We're ancient gods, whatever we are. But don't tell me how to win because how I earn victory points. Tell me how to win because of who I am in this universe and what I need to do to be successful. That's your first page. Second page, third page, startup. Fourth page, game structure. Fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth page, walk me beat by beat through that structure. So I am encountering rules in the same order I would encounter them while actually playing. Do that, you will have a good rule book. Don't do that, you will have an epically poor rule book. I am shocked how often this is not done. This is such 101 type stuff. It drives me nuts. So, sorry, I got a little carried away there. Also, Brendan would like to know, how or why do you think you differ from other reviewers in this question? I don't know that I do. If I do, though, I can only assume it is because of my background. I went to the University of Washington in Seattle for 2 years with a scientific and technical communication major, which is now called these days technical writing. They didn't have a term for it back then, back in the 80s. Is that right? Is that the 80s? Oh my gosh, yes, back literally in... 90s? No, in 88. I graduated high school in 88. Yeah. And I went to college 89 and 90. Okay, yep, 88 and 90, 89 and 90. So, and so, I don't know, I've been trained in this, and this is what I learned. Never mind the fact that I spent years being a Nintendo gameplay counselor. I was on the phone for 3 years with people all day long, explaining to them how to beat bosses in their NES and Super NES and Game Boy games. I've spent a lot of time in my life learning how to teach people how to do things. This is how you teach people how to do things. And if you don't do it that way, it breaks. And these are things that a lot of people in the board game industry don't seem to understand. Drives me nuts. But I will get off my high horse and move on to Patrick. Or Patty, his friends must call him. Patrick says, oh, honey, this is a good one. What do you think would indicate to you that it's time to move on from Rahdo Runs Through? Aww.
Golly, am I supposed to answer that, or are you answering that?
Yes, because my throat is sore, because I just was shouting.
You just had a bit of a high horsey thing.
Insert dead air.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think, because I know your qualifications for the...
Well, you can answer on my behalf.
Are different from mine.
Oh, well, all right. Oh, so, okay.
Probably, I think that you and I
You have qualifications? No. I would think you'd have me do it till I'm dead in the grave. Time enough for sleep in the grave. No. Keep running through those games.
No, I just mean that I am a business person. So the whole...
Yes, this is what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
Okay, well, you know what I'm saying.
We'll say it.
You say it.
You say it.
All right. So I like the idea of doing things the right way and thinking long term and building up, with good service and good product, a clientele that hopefully that you get to have repeat business with and that sort of thing. So the whole idea of just doing something for a year or two and then moving on to something else is just not in my nature. I've always been a long-term thinker.
Yeah. And now that I've done the groundwork, why would I walk away from it? It makes no sense. It breaks your brain to even consider such a thing.
It absolutely does.
Yep.
But you are different. You like new things. You like to move on and try new stuff. So that's why what I said about my qualifications, I think I was saying I qualify things differently than you do. Not that I have a qualification to answer the question. But so that I think is going to be something that we negotiate as we go on. And part of it too is that we want to do more traveling. So we have to sort of figure out how we can sort the Rahdo runs through scheduling stuff into also being able to travel more.
Yeah.
So that would certainly be one of the things that might make a scheduling change.
That's an interesting point.
Okay.
Well, to answer Patty's question, my number one concern about doing Rahdo runs through is that I get burnt out on board games. Because having made video games for 20 years, I am epically burned out on video games. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to go back to it. I can't play a video game the way a normal person plays a video game. I will always and forever play a video game as a designer. First and foremost. I'll always be evaluating. I will always be studying. I will always be analyzing. I can't simply enjoy. And I don't find any enjoyment in them as a result. And so if that were to ever start happening with board games, well, I would has a sad. So I don't want that to happen. And that's going to be the number one thing. Because of what I was just talking about, and I've mentioned in the past. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you may have gotten the impression that I was like, oh, woe is me, I can't go and play Kingdom Builder, because I'd really like to, because I love Kingdom Builder, and Jen loves Kingdom Builder, and I would so love to play all those expansions, and why won't more people thumb them so they can work their way up the request list? Come on, people! I thumbed them, you can do it too! But anyway, you might think, oh, poor you, you don't get to play your... But, I love playing new games. I love learning new games. I absolutely, that is core to my very nature. You go and look at my CV on LinkedIn/in/Richard Ham. Somebody noted not too long ago that I never stayed anywhere for more than 3 years. Every job, 3 years, and I was ready to move on, and that was true.
Yep.
And by the way, we're right around 3 years of Rahdo runs through now. Well, actually, we're on our 5th year, but like 3 or 4. So
that first year or two don't really.
Yeah, because I was still working full time and stuff like that. But I like new things, and so far, Rahdo runs through has not impacted my enjoyment of board games. If it ever starts feeling like it does, or, and I should hasten to add, if it ever starts feeling like it enjoys Jen's enjoyment of board games, either one of us, it ends right then, or it doesn't end if we finish out that year, and then it's over because I enjoy them too much as it is right now. And I mean, they're such a wonderful pastime to share with Jen. We both enjoy them so much. And so that's my number one worry, is that they would hamper that, and I can't let that happen. So that would be the answer to your question, Patty. Thank you for asking. Justin, meanwhile. Yes, I saw this one when it came in. Honey, do you remember The Bloody Inn? It was a little card game. We ran a hotel. And when the customers checked in, we would either kill them in their sleep and steal their stuff, but then we'd have to dispose of the bodies.
Oh, yeah.
Or we would recruit them into our ne'er-do-well band of and all that. And it was a really clever game, and it had a very, Tim Burton-esque presentation with its really kind of quirky art style and all that.
Yeah, I do.
And it was very, very, it was funny and silly, but very, very dark.
And we had
very, very Sweeney Todd type stuff.
The hotel to house the bodies.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Who was it? Justin. This is a different Justin.
So many Justins.
So many Justins. Justin thought, hey, that sounded pretty cool. But I can't play that with my 12-year-old. And at first he thought that it had a 12 plus on the box. And he was like, are they insane? That's crazy. He then went back and checked, and it was actually a 14. But he's not even sure if that game is appropriate thematically for a 14-year-old. Because it's pretty dark.
Yeah.
It's silly. It's tongue-in-cheek. But it's dark.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that really prompted Justin to ask, well, who decides the age recommendation on a game? I mean, do they base it purely on the age required to handle the mechanics of the game? If so, do you think, based on games like Bloody Inn, should they also seriously consider the theme when recommending an age to play the game? Surely you must have something to say about that, Honey Pie. You got nieces and nephews.
Yeah, of course you should think about the theme with an age recommendation. Absolutely. I mean, that's what movies are about, isn't it? The rating systems on movies.
Yes. Do you remember the game well enough to be able to say whether you would agree or disagree with Justin that it was too dark thematically for a 14-year-old?
Gosh, the kids grow up so young these days.
They grow up fast these days. Yep.
Yeah.
With their iTunes and their GoPros.
Yeah, I don't know. That is really difficult for me to answer because I think probably every kid, every family is different. So I would lean towards putting an age recommendation on that's probably a little bit more lenient than, and let the parent decide. You're saying,
what do you mean lenient?
Oh, I would
erring
say,
to the side of caution, or
no, leaning towards the side of being more permissive. So I would say, if maybe 14 is better, but actually, probably some kids at 12 could handle it. And if they have a very involved parent, and who's willing to, I mean, this is what parenting is all about, isn't it? It's talking about situations with your kid, going through them, helping them learn why they would do or not do something. I think actually it could be a very good experience builder, relationship builder, thinking through, it's all that kind of stuff is really important. So depending on the relationship you have with your kid or how your kid's personality is, it could be just fine. I don't know. I'm less about making rules and more about people just taking personal responsibility.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's Bloody Inn specifically. As Justin mentioned, if this were a movie, there's no way it would be rated low enough for a 12-year-old to watch. I don't know if that's true. I'm thinking of Throw Mama from the Train. That was a PG movie, or PG-13 anyway, and that was a pretty dark movie about plotting to throw Mama from the train. Or, God, I mean, that kind of dark, wicked humor kind of approach is really not all that uncommon. What's interesting, I do agree that it's very just slapdash and arbitrary. Because obviously, the people deciding these ratings are the developers of the games themselves. And it's very inconsistent. I mean, there's no way it can't be because there is no... In the board game industry is so small, there's no such thing as any kind of unifying regulatory commission. There's no MPAA, the motion picture something or other, the movie ratings guide. The video game industry has a similar guide that does a very good job of rating things for parents who want to have an understanding of what they're exposing their kids to. I think the only way to get better game ratings would be an initiative spearheaded for the board game industry, because I don't know of any board game committee, any august body that has enough reach that Mattel and Fantasy Flight and Tree Frog Games would all say, yes, I will submit my game and slow down my ability to produce this game, to put it through a 3-month approval process so that you guys can slap it with a 13 plus or an 8 plus. And include little qualifiers like includes mature subjects, or whatever. I think that would be awesome. But the reality is, the board game industry isn't professional enough for that. It hasn't arrived. That's not going to happen anytime soon. So I think in the meantime, as a parent, Justin, well, I mean, on some level, I don't think there's a problem here because Justin, you were a concerned parent. You spotted it. You felt it wasn't appropriate for your kids, and you didn't pick it up. You did the right thing. You caveat emptored the heck out of that, and it worked out okay. And, I think board game industry is kind of a fly-by-night. We're rickety. We're young upstarts, and that's just kind of the way it's going to be. It's a buyer beware kind of situation. Check back in 20 years, and maybe we'll have broken through.
As it gets more popular, some regulatory agency will come along and...
Yep.
And probably publishers will sign up to get that rating because, again, once you've got somebody's seal of approval for a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old game or whatever. Voila, you are done.
Well, yeah, I mean, it always comes down to, once it becomes a big enough deal, then there's the potential for government regulation to step in, and that's when, okay, we will self-regulate, we'll do it, okay. Just don't government regulate us. We don't need a comic codes authority. So, but I mean, board games are so far away. I mean, board games just don't exist in pop culture awareness at all. So that's a long ways off. Let's see. Simon, honey, would like to know about Brexit. So that'll come later. We'll have to come back to that. That is definitely not to do with board games. Justin. All right, okay, this is the same Justin. Oh, wait, no, that was Justin when he noticed it was actually plus 14. Peter, honey, do you or I have any funny pet-related board game disasters?
Funny pet-related board game disasters. Nothing's springing to mind.
They're well-behaved.
Yeah.
Well, I should say now she is well-behaved. Yeah. About nothing more than, Tula was, if we had to be constantly vigilant about when cleaning games up, not letting any piece of cardboard or cube end up on the floor. Because if we did, it would be found in some corner months later, completely chewed and ruined.
Yep. Tula ate everything.
Just on the off chance.
On the other hand, would get, which she wouldn't eat it, but she loves to bring things to me in her mouth because she gets rewarded for working.
Yes.
And so she, if you get a bunch of dog saliva on cardboard, sometimes that ruins it. But she never chewed on them, so she would come and she does this little dance with her front paws to let me know she's got something in her mouth, and I put my hand down and cup it underneath her mouth, and she spits it out. Yep, and then she gets a treat.
Yep.
Because she's awesome.
She's a good girl.
Speaking of which, she's sitting here staring at me, so I will give her a treat because she's good. Come on. And she's
alrighty. Let's see. Next question will come in the after game section. Last question. Given there have been recently apps designed for cat and dogs on tablets and smartphones, how long do you think until publishers, designers stumble upon this and make a board game for this new audience? Can you imagine a board game we would buy for Dob?
You know what is hilarious?
What?
I just saw, excuse me, on not Kickstarter. Anyway, on Facebook, that there is this thing that you can now call your dog. You mount the monitor at dog level, and it has a certain noise that obviously the dog learns to recognize as you calling it.
Oh, you mean when you're out of the house?
Monitor.
Yeah.
So you can call your dog from work or whatever.
Yep.
And there's also a treat dispenser.
Yep. It actually throws it through the air.
Yeah,
I've seen that thing.
So I'm thinking, whenever I Skype with you when I'm in England or whatever, the dogs are like, what? No, we don't care. She's on Skype. They just don't seem to recognize it's me at all. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how that monitor would work.
Well, I think the only thing the dog would care about is, that's the thing that gives treats.
Yeah. I'm over here.
It's doing the sort of thing that it might do to give me a treat. Yeah, I saw that too. I thought that was cute, but yeah. But can you imagine a board game for a beagle? What would it be? What does a beagle do for fun? Plays fetch. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, dogs have the brains of 2-year-olds, right?
Basically.
Are there board games for 2-year-olds? I guess there must be. Yeah, I guess it's possible. But the only reason you get a board game for a 2-year-old is because it spurs mental cognition and pushes them forward and stuff like that. But dogs aren't going to get any smarter. So, they've reached their apex at the 2-year-old toddler level. So I just don't see an upside to it.
No, and you think about the kind of games dogs want to play. Well, they want interaction with you, not with cardboard. Or they want physical activity, or they want food.
Yeah.
Right? So those kind of nudgy balls that have food in them, those are kind of puzzle games for dogs. They have to roll
That's
a
true.
certain way.
Yeah, you're pretty cruel about those Kong things that you'll just line with peanut butter and then just leave them and then figure it out. This is a puzzle game. Whee!
They totally are happy to work for
So I guess, Yep, Jen has designed a board game for dogs.
It's called Shovel Kong full of peanut butter.
Let's see. All right. Oh, that's another non-game related one. And Alan has a question about game calibration, Honey Pie.
Oh, okay.
He's talking about playing with his wife.
Game calibration.
And one of his daughters, and games that score really, really close.
Oh, okay. Yep.
It seems like no matter what, wow, it's always seems to come down to like 3 or 4 points. And if I just made one choice differently, I would have had 2 less points and you would have won instead of I would have won and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is a game like this really well calibrated to reward skilled play and yet produce a close scoring game? Or, after many rounds and a fair amount of time, is victory and loss more of a matter of seemingly minor decisions or even luck? Or is that the point of calibration? To make it so that many small decisions balance out in the end among all players and their many moves, making it unfair to call victory arbitrary? Or would you agree that the fun is in playing a game like this one and not wondering whether a victory of a few points or a single point represents a better played game? Is there perhaps
Wait a minute, that's a new sentence.
a difference between good scoring calibration for shorter filler games as compared with longer games? Do you have any other thoughts on game calibration? Would it be feasible to do a top 10 games with the most well-calibrated scoring?
I'm pretty sure, first of all, he did not address this to me. But I will...
He opened it by talking about playing with his wife.
Okay, I will try and hit some of those run-on sentences.
He did. He put question marks on them.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
oh, you were just stringing it together.
But, yeah, I mean...
Wow.
Objection, leading the witness. Let them answer the question. Come on, Alan.
Okay, first of all, I think our most satisfying games are when we are within a couple points of each other.
Yes.
So I guess I am absolutely for calibrated games.
Yeah. By the way, I've never heard that term before. Seems pretty clever.
Yeah.
I'll go with it. Yeah. That was a well-calibrated game. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, I would have called it balanced, but
yeah.
I like calibrated. Mm-hmm. So, God, can you repeat one of the questions?
Well, I mean, it's basically, what do you think? And he gave several potential different things you could think. And you've just said what you think. You like it. And I certainly do too. I mean, nothing makes me and Jen happier than ending on a tie.
Yeah.
Neither of us have any interest in winning.
When we have, and especially if we have to go to the 3rd or 4th level of what the tiebreaker is.
Yeah.
Because we're that close. That's awesome.
Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, we hate blowouts.
Yeah.
Can't stand them.
Neither one of us feels like that.
Yeah, I mean, the blowouter feels terrible for the blowouted. The blowoutee. Because, that's awful. What happened? Why did that go so bad? So they don't feel good. The blowoutee feels stupid. Well, I'm just an idiot. This game makes me feel dumb.
And who likes to feel like an idiot?
Yeah. And, that's a lose-lose. We love nothing more than it coming down to the wire and because really neither of us care about winning or losing. We just want to have a good time together. Yep. We just want to share the experience. So, I mean, a well-calibrated game is a thing of beauty.
Yep.
And then to the deeper question of, is it truly reflective of, is it artificial? Is it good design? Should games allow for blowouts? Because a blowout means, somebody was stupid and somebody was smart, and they deserve to blow it out. Survival of the fittest kind of thing.
Well, I think that depends on the kind of games you want to play.
Yeah, or it depends on the type of player you are, really. Well,
yeah, but also if you buy those kind of games, then you wouldn't want to calibrate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure the calibration exists. I mean, I have certainly seen in some games catch-up mechanisms in that the further somebody excels, the more difficult it is for them to keep their momentum. And so they end up slowing down, which gives everybody else around the table an opportunity to catch up. One could argue that is completely artificial. The real world doesn't work that way. The rich tend to get richer instead of more burdened and slowed down so that everybody else can rise to their level. And shouldn't games be actual, true, proper approximations of, real world simulations that they're trying to recreate? Do you think so, Honey Pie?
No, I guess not.
Yep.
Well, again, what are we doing here? What is the point of sitting down at this table together?
To have fun.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's not your point of sitting down at the table, if you want to boost your ego and blow somebody out, or whatever the reason is, I don't want to make it sound like that's the bad way to do it, and the way we do it is the good way, because it's just different play styles. But for the way that we like to game.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and also, I would tend to think that most of these things are about. It was somewhere in the middle there that it's not so much about. I would think in a well balanced or in a what was your term? Calibrated game. You could still have a situation where if somebody plays significantly better, they'll blow the other person out. I mean, Jen and I, we do tend to play at roughly the same level. I mean, I would say we're comparable. My problem is I am more by the seat of my pants, and Jen is more analytical, so she tends to win more. There's occasionally games that'll come along that... is it Skype?
Yep.
Oh, who is it?
I don't know. I'm trying
All
to
right. Well, folks, we're going to be right back to you. There's somebody on Skype. Okay. We are back, and it is several hours since we were last chatting, and I don't even remember where we were. Do you?
Nope.
No? Alrighty. Well, let's see here.
We had dinner. We talked with my mom and dad. It was very nice.
Good time. Alan, it was about the game calibration.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Well, yes. Long story short, we like it. I think when it's done well, it doesn't take away from the skill implicit in the game, and it's good because it's about the journey, not the destination.
Amen.
Alrighty. And then let's move on to Ian, who wants to talk about promos for games that you pick up at conventions and whatnot, or Kickstarter exclusives that you can only get if you back on Kickstarter. Things that you can't get unless you're in the right place at the right time, and later on, you're just SOL. Mm-hmm. Do you think they're a good idea? Are they often good addition to a game or just a throwaway add-on? Should they be made available to the wider community? What do you think, Honey Pie? I'm sure you've lost a lot of sleep on this issue.
Well, I do know that when there's some limited edition thing that I want it. Gosh darn it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I could see that actually it would increase the desirability of being in the right place at the right time and making people actually assure themselves that they are. So, from a marketing standpoint, that's a really good idea. But from maybe a gamer standpoint, do I think that the expansion or the special promos, I since I don't actually open the boxes or anything, I am afraid that I do not have a clue if I've actually even played with any expansion promo stuff at all. Mm-hmm. So I think that's about all I have to say.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess they suck. And I guess they're awesome. I mean, they do both at the same time. They are in a quantum state of being, these promos. Because, yeah, it does really blow that you just can't get them. Now, I mean...
But you can in math trades and stuff later.
Yeah, I mean, for some things, yes, some things, no. Some things are super rare. Some of these promos, the instant they go out and people get them, they start flipping them for 20, 30, 50, $100
Oh.
for really rare, hard-to-get things. It's ridiculous. Now, I used to chase the bug. Heck, I mean, I am the guy who years ago started the worldwide promo math trade. Why did I do it? So I could get all the promos I wasn't able to get living out in Europe and not being able to go to Gen Con and whatnot. And there just seemed to be no really good way to do it, and I was chasing that dragon all the time. I guess time has passed, and I have learned to let it go and not worry about having the 107% of what this game can offer and just being satisfied with 100%. But that might be part and parcel with the fact that I only play games through 2 or 3 times and then I move on to the next game. If we were normals and we bought 5 or 10 games a year, maybe, is that normal? I mean, heck, even before I started doing Rahdo runs through, I was buying 100 games a year easily. Yep. But if we were normal and only bought 10 games a year, I think I'd care a heck of a lot more. I'd want to squeeze every last precious drop, every last card out there. And it would be really sucky if I wasn't able to do it. Or I could only do it if I got lucky. I mean, heck, I had to work really, really hard to get every single promo for Thunderstone, including those werewolf promos and the Tribbles card for Star Trek Expedition and all these really tough things. Now, for some people, the chase is actually a good thing. I mean, people have loved collecting baseball cards for over a century now, and trying to get their perfect collection, and going out and trading with people, and the existence of the worldwide promo mat trade that anybody can get involved in, which means you have a decent chance of getting a lot of the stuff that's out there that you might feel bad about missing, does help with that. So, I mean, I guess if you're so disposed, you can start to look at it as a game. It's just a metagame around the game that you already love, and just try to have fun with it. And honestly, I mean, I think you do have to make peace with it, because as Jen said, it is just good business sense to do it. Anytime a Kickstarter campaign launches that does not include exclusive limited edition stuff.
Hey, even Rahdo Runs Through had some.
Yes, I am guilty. You wanted those Rahdo Runs Through dice last year? Well, they're gone now. You wanted the Ogre dice this year? Well, that's it.
No, that's not true.
That's not true?
The Ogre dice are going to be available.
Oh, right. No, it was the specific color.
The Glitter Gleeple.
The Glitter Gleeple. Yeah, the Glitter Gleeple. You want that Glitter Gleeple? It's gone. It just makes sense. It's just a smart thing to do. And people who care about these things, who want to make sure, well, then back it on Kickstarter. You're doing the company a favor, and they're, by helping them actually achieve what they need to do, and they're returning the favor by giving you a very special thank you that other people can't get down the road. And so it just makes sense. And while it hurts that, I came to the party late, I'm 2 years later, man, I wish I could have that thing. Well, I mean, there's going to be all kinds of things in this life you're not going to get that you'd like. It's at the end of the day, it is just a glass green glitter meeple, or a Rahdo Runs Through die, the ones we did last year. I mean,
yeah, those are cool.
Yeah, they're really, really cool. But it's it's not the end of the world if you don't get it. I mean, and yeah, it's just. See, that's the thing. I used to chase after this stuff hard, and I played that game. And I guess on some level I actually enjoyed it. I mean, heck, I started the math trade to take it to the next level. But these days, I don't know. I think I'm more willing to say, yeah, you know what? If I had a nickel for everything in my life that I might want to be able to have, that I'll never be able to get, I'm not even knowing where that particular analogy is going, but you just gotta remember, they're just things. They're just stuff. They're just little pieces of cardboard and paper and plastic.
Don't say that about glass.
But that's not true for glass.
Of course not.
Glass is special. Glass is forever. But that aside, all the other ones, they're just things. And life goes on. I mean, that's a very, very hard thing, a habit to break that is so ingrained in us.
Especially Americans.
Yeah, especially Americans from an early age. And, the sooner you can cast off the shackles of rampant materialistic consumerism, the sooner you'll be happy and just live and be satisfied with what you got. Is Star Trek Expeditions, my copy of it, made inexorably better because I got that ultra rare Tribbles promo? It's cool. I like it. I love it when it pops up in the game, but if I didn't have it, it's not like I'd suddenly think that the game is
rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, I'd still enjoy the game regardless. So,
I would like to interject something there.
Oh, Jen has now got some thought.
We are getting slightly into the non-game area.
Yes.
But basically, I think part of what your sagacity about this is that we have a lot of games.
We do.
And we don't get back to them. And so the idea of adding an extra little something to a game that we're not even going to get to play for
I know. That's true.
That certainly lessens the desirability of this extra maybe 10% of enjoyment that you might get from having that extra special something. Mm-hmm. So I think there's that. I think there's a certain point where you have enough, and extra doesn't necessarily make you happier. And we certainly have enough when you look at the amount of games that we have. Yeah. So, and that could be one reason why you don't feel quite so driven about
as much as I used to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, of course I want 100%. Of course I want the complete set. Of course I want the Hank Aaron and the Babe Ruth, and I don't even know anything about baseball, so I can't even pretend to make up a full collection of a baseball card set. But I don't know. that way doesn't lie happiness. And like we just said a second ago, it's about the journey, not the destination. It's about just sitting down and playing the games and having fun.
Yep.
Not about making sure that every additional little bonus happens to be in the box.
Well, and even if we do have a bunch of extra stuff, we don't necessarily play with all the extra stuff every time. So, is it going to really make that big a difference?
Yep. Let's see. Ian also asks, I know some people...
Can I say something else about this? Because this is a little something that I read a couple of years ago, and it's really made sense to me, is that it actually isn't the big things in life that really make a big difference, because the big things, you have to deal with them, you make decisions, you move on. I mean, they tend to be big paths in your life. But the little things, on the other hand, they kind of can niggle at you, or they could bug you, or they could, make you happy if things are going right or whatever, but they don't tend to be something that we spend a lot of time or energy thinking on. And actually, if you can figure out that... He's giving me the big eyeball look.
Well, you were giving me big eyeballs.
Wrap it up,
when
lady.
You said, no, not at all, not at all.
Okay.
When you said actually, your eyes went really wide, so my eyes went really wide.
We're communicating. We're sitting across the table still at each other. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, this thing that I read a few years ago was that if there's something that bugs you, all the little tiny things that bug you, but they bug you every day, or they bug you every time you go into that room, or they bug you every time you wear that pair of shoes, or whatever that little niggly thing is, that is a constant something in your life, fix it. Because fixing that little stupid thing will bring you so much happiness on a daily or minutely basis that it's really worth doing. And, the big stuff will take care of itself. When it happens, you'll deal with it. It's just all this other little stuff that we can allow to wear us down or, mess with us over time that really degrades the quality of your life. And so that's one of the things I think about, too, when you think about, well, do we have all of this stuff for the game? Well, maybe we do or maybe we don't. But when it becomes to the point where it is bugging you enough that you don't have the triple card or whatever for a game that you play all the time, then absolutely. Go out and get that one thing that will make it that much better for you.
Well, Ian continues, I ask as someone who mostly plays solo and with his wife, doesn't go to trade shows, or has enough cash to back Kickstarters when there are great games out there already. So I must jealously look on to these things. So, yes, well, it is great to say, go out and spend $30 and get that triple card. That's not always a viable thing. And, Ian, you just said it there. You jealously look on at these things. And I think everybody can agree that, anything that is driven by jealousy is not necessarily a healthy outlook on life. And, if you can find it in yourself to let it go and just not worry about that and just play the game and enjoy it, even without that extra little piece of paper, I think you'll be happier for it. And it's like a great not leavening and a great unburdening to just not worry about something as small as a little promo pack of 5 cards that let you play a 6th character. That'd be great to have. Of course, you'd love to have it, but the other 5 characters are still pretty great. Let's see. Ian goes on. I know people would say it's a perk of going to Gen Con, or I backed early, so I should get something extra. But really, does me having that extra thing to enhance my game in any way reduce the enjoyment of the person who picked it up at the con or backed on Kickstarter? And in all honesty, I'd have to say, yeah, it does. The fundamental psychological drive of promos, of exclusivity, is...
fancy clothes, or brand names, or whatever.
Or, sweet cars that only you can afford, or that are limited print runs of anything, is the fact there is a palpable sense of enjoyment for owning such a thing. Because it is special, it is limited, it enhances, and, if everybody could have it, yes, the person who did, by your own admission, pay extra. They went on Kickstarter, they paid extra, and in the process, they helped ensure the project actually happened and stuff. There's a whole no other meta level connection or considerations there, but they paid extra. They feel, well, yeah, and I got this, and it makes me feel good. Oh, but anybody could have it? Well, now I feel bad. Now that's just another version. Well, that's not jealousy. It's not envy. Well, it's something.
Disappointment.
It's disappointment. It is no more. I mean, it's a disappointment at the inability to realize your avarice, quite frankly. So on some level, that is also an unhealthy emotional drive. Just as much as the jealousy you feel for not being able to have it. And it's a shame all this stuff has to come about because of a little pack of 5 extra playing cards, which really shouldn't matter to anybody. I mean, when you just sit back and look at it objectively in the greater context of your life, or your gaming life for that matter. And I mean, honestly, that's the thing. I mean, I chased this, and I would get really frustrated when I couldn't get stuff. And, I would do, for a while, when I first started doing the worldwide promo match rate, I was doing them quarterly. I think, no, maybe even bi-monthly, because I want to try again. I got to try and get this. I'm going to get this. And there were some people who, I remember there was a guy who had the triple card, and every time he'd listen, and every time I would put my best thing forward to try to get it, and it just wouldn't come, and I was like, And, I look back at that now, and I just say, what was I thinking? It's just a little triple card. Or the Werewolf Pack for Thunderstone, or, there was a whole bunch of them. Yes, anybody?
Well, do you remember I used to collect Dickens Village?
Yes.
It's a little porcelain thing that you'd stick a light in at Christmas time, and little houses that would light up. And they're just absolutely wonderful and lovely. And there was a really family tradition around it for me because, I always got a building for Christmas. And so it was fun to shop with my mom, and, it was just kind of a whole tradition. But I can remember there was always this castle that I wanted, Kenilworth Castle. And it was one that was made, 10 years or something before I even was aware of.
And was long
gone.
Print.
Yeah, long gone. But finally, do you remember when I found the Kenilworth Castle and we drove to Timbuktu to pick it up? And I'm sure the lady bought it, at the time for $30 or $20 or something like that. And I paid $300 for it. And that was at a time when I think we were 22 or 23, and we didn't have much extra money. But this was a real stretch, and I finally found one and everything.
And this was before the internet, so it was a miracle she even found the thing.
Yeah. I mean, you had newsletters that would go out to these collectors of Department 56 stuff, and oh my gosh. But you know what? I don't think I displayed it maybe a couple times, a couple Christmases.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I still think of it now. I know exactly where it is. It's at my sister's. She's storing a bunch of stuff for us while we're in Europe. But
i.e., just more stuff.
It's just more stuff. Amazing.
Which, as we previously established, does not apply to glass.
Right. Glass makes your life better in all ways.
Yes, in all ways.
It makes mine
so, better. It's a tough subject.
Yeah, but it's not just only games. It's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. And honestly, that's my feeling. That's the decision I had to come to for myself. And as previously admitted, it helps that I'm in a really weird situation. But honestly, I think even if I had never picked up that iPhone to start filming Rahdo Runs Through, I would have eventually gotten to this point anyway. And I would have just gotten to the point where, you know what, I'm just going to enjoy for what I have. I'm not going to worry if I don't have every little bit and bob. As long as I'm having fun, the absence of one little thing, I'm not going to let it ruin my fun. So that's pretty much how I look at it. And I do not hold, and I quite frankly, anytime I see a Kickstarter that doesn't offer exclusive limited edition promos, I just think they're being silly. I totally think they should.
Well, they take away the urgency, don't they?
Yeah.
If there is not some reason to invest now, why would you?
Yeah. Jen started out by saying it's just good business sense.
Yep.
And so I do not. It's not my problem that they're actually trying to do the best they can for their business. It's not just because of my jealousy and my avarice that they should put what is best for their bottom line on hold. That doesn't work for me.
Well, you're talking about it from two different standpoints. You're talking about it from a personal standpoint and from a business standpoint.
Yep.
So,
but thanks for asking, Ian. I don't know if that helps at all. But that's it, honey. We have finished with the game-related questions, and it is now almost 9 p.m. Are we going to go back and do the personal-related stuff that we skipped, or are we going to save that till tomorrow?
I'm not sure. What do you feel like?
We'll let you know in a minute, folks.
Okay.
Okay, everybody, we have decided to burn the midnight oil and get this done. Mostly because Jen is still working on all those gamer bags. She really wants to get these last few assembled.
Yep.
So we can get them gone.
We'll get them mailed on Monday, hopefully.
Yes.
That would be nice.
Yep. Jen has deployed all of her workers. She has deployed a worker to the question answering space and a worker to the bag assembly space.
Yep.
She is now going to resolve these actions.
And actually, she's reserved spots at the gluing station as well.
Indeed. So, first question actually came from two different people at the same time. Andrew and, where's the other one? Why can't I find it? And Rob. Both wanted to ask about my life on a boat. Specifically, Rob said, hey, someone who's considering moving onto a sailboat in the Pacific Northwest, I want to hear more about your childhood on a boat. You said your father built it. What kind of boat was it? Did you travel on it? Pros and cons? And whereas Andrew said, can you tell me a bit more about the experience? When, where, what kind of boat? Did you enjoy it?
Boat.
Okay. My dad decided, must have been when I was 3, I guess, because I certainly wasn't consulted, that he wanted to build, with his own 2 hands, a sailboat and sail around the world because he read some book in the 60s about some guy who did exactly that, and it inspired him, and it kind of became his life's mission. And so, when I was 5, we moved to Knights Landing, California, where we were able to, I don't know if we rented our own. I was a kid. I didn't know. But we had a house that had a big, gigantic plot of land, like a whole extra lot that was just completely empty. And so my dad taught himself how to weld, taught himself everything. He had been in the Navy in his younger years. Of course, he was still in I guess it must have been his late 20s at that point. And taught himself everything he needed to know to build a 42-foot sailboat. Steel hull, named the Whatever. And,
that is so your dad.
That is so my dad. And, it took him, it must have taken him, 4 years or so. Because I think we moved on to it when I was maybe 9, maybe 8 or 9. I'm not really quite sure. But I seem to recall him working on it ever since I was in kindergarten, which means it must have started when I was around 5. And I think it must have taken him 3 or 4 years. Although, to be honest, he never actually finished it. But he did get it to a point, and again, this is back in the 70s. He had to, there was no internet, there was no nothing. But, my dad was just that kind of guy. He was an incredibly handy guy. He reminds me of that old Mike Myers Saturday Night Live sketch, middle-aged man, the guy who can do anything. And what about your God? I'm working on it! That was a good sketch. I don't know why I have failed to become middle-aged man.
Because you have me.
There you go. That's what was the arch nemesis of middle-aged man? Because it was a self-empowered, independent woman or something like that. Anyway, so Dad built it. We moved on it, and we lived on it for, it must have been 4 or 5 years. Again, I don't have an exact timeline because I was a little kid, and I just didn't concern myself with the passage of time other than to mark my birthdays. So we, and when I say it wasn't finished, it mostly was. We had the mast, we had all the rigging. It was totally livable. It was me, my mom, my dad, and my brother Ryan, my younger brother Ryan, who was 3 years younger than me. We lived with a big German Shepherd named Boatnik and a little tiny, I don't know if it was a Lhasa, but some little lapdog named Wiggles. And we were all squished into this 42-foot steel hull sailboat for, must have been four years, maybe 5 years. Living in the California Delta, moving from marina to marina, with my dad commuting to work. He worked at AT&T for his entire adult professional career. Sometimes he'd have to drive 2 hours there and back to get out to whatever slough we were happening to be living in that week, out in the middle of nowhere.
Why did you move so often?
At this point, you'd have to ask my mom. Again, I was not consulted on these things. They were not checking with me and Ryan about, well, what do you guys think we should do? We were just along for the ride. But, it was I guess it was a big adventure. It was interesting. Before we moved on the boat, when I was living in Knights Landing, I was a really popular, outgoing kid. A straight A student, really involved in sports. I was kind of on the track to being one of those, smart, jock, popular, homecoming king type kids. Because everybody knew me, everybody loved me, all my teachers loved me, and all that. But then when we moved on the boat, where was it? Was it Rio Vista? I don't remember exactly where, but Islands Marina, wherever that is. We did try to keep both my brother and I going to public schools, and that was a really interesting experience. Sorry, this isn't really about the boat. Should I just stick to the boat? They asked about the boat. They didn't ask about my interesting experiences as a minority. We'll just get back to the boat. So the boat, it was cool. As a 9 to 14-year-old, there were problems. There was absolutely no privacy. I had my own little bunk with a curtain, but that was about it. It was incredibly tight. And for the majority of that, my brother and I were homeschooled. And actually, I kind of homeschooled myself. My mom just pulled her hair out every day trying to wrestle my brother to the ground to get him to learn anything, because he's always been stubborn and willful and rebellious. Whereas while they were off in the back of the boat fighting, I'd just be up in the bow reading whatever I was supposed to read from the correspondence course that Mom taught us out of. And I just taught myself. And but yeah, when I was 12, I was a certified scuba diver, working in the marina, doing dives for people who lost their keys and stuff like that. And I lived all year round in the water. So did Ryan. We were just, as comfortable. We were a small tight family. Neither Ryan or I really had any other friends because there just weren't any other kids around, and we weren't going to school. And that did change me fundamentally. I think, put me on a different path in life. But I have no complaints because I'm pretty happy with where I ended up. And it was like living in a mobile home, really, because while the boat was, for the most part, seaworthy, the big thing we never finished was the sails. And I have very, very fond remembrances of just taking these big, gigantic sheets of canvas out into fields, out in Vallejo County and whatnot, and spreading them all over these big, fallow farmlands in the off season. And me, Mom, Ryan, and Dad all just working our separate corners, sewing these sails up. And again, I couldn't tell you why we never got it finished. But it was great. And, it was a really odd childhood. It definitely changed me. It definitely changed Ryan. I'm sure it changed all of us. And I can't really tell you much about the specifics. About about the most exciting it ever got was at one point we were in dry dock. Yeah, that was when we were in Vallejo. And we were in dry dock, and we spent like 6 months out of the water, still living in it, having to, whenever I have to go to the bathroom, we'd have to climb down a 20-foot ladder. And it was amazing. Boatnik, our German Shepherd, could run face down that ladder, even though it was incredibly steep incline, and could climb back up it. She was a clever dog, great dog. But we were out to do hull repair and whatnot. But I remember when we were done with that, and we finally put back in, just puttering around San Francisco Bay. That was, I think, the biggest, with some swells on a windy day and all of that. But, we never really got seaworthy. We never really quite realized that dream. And I remember at one point what I was told was my dad had gone and spent the weekend at his brother's house somewhere for whatever reason. I have no idea why. And that weekend there had been a really big thunderstorm. And when my dad came back the next day and he said, yeah, I slept like a baby through that thunderstorm. I didn't hear all the tackle slapping against the mast. I didn't hear all the rain pattering just, 3 feet above my head. I think we're done with this. And so he very promptly found and sold it to a couple of guys from South Africa who decided, well, we're going to finish what you started, sir. And they actually did finish it. And last we knew, they sailed that thing halfway across the world to South Africa. I've always been interested to know what happened. Is it still out there somewhere? Is it still afloat? I would love to see that boat again someday, but it's long, long gone. Sorry, I can't give more of a mature report to what it was like. I can only give you my personal experience as as a young kid who it was just what life was like. I didn't know any better. And that was it. Do you have any questions about the boat, Honey Pie? Or shall I move on to the next one?
I've heard most of the stories about the boat.
Yep.
But I'm sure somebody will now ask you about your experiences as a minority.
Remember, folks, all questions to questions@rahdo.com. No topic is too tough to tackle. Alrighty, so back to Peter, who had asked about pet board games and whatnot. He also asked, you often talk about your love of dogs, but have you ever owned or been owned by a cat?
Ooh.
The board game community seems to be very anti-cat. Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower springs to mind, but I can never understand why.
Maybe cats jump up on tables and wreck
cats. That's a very. He was the one who actually pointed out the problems with cats. There you go. Maybe you actually answered your own question, Peter, as to why the board game community as a whole is anti-cat. Said cats do not respect your personal board game space. I had when we lived in Knight's Landing, we got 2 cats, a orange tabby cat who I named Shazam. Shazam. After the 70s TV show, the live-action Shazam show, the Shazam ISIS Hour. I'm sure everybody remembers.
Oh, Mighty Isis.
Oh, Mighty Isis. Yep. That kind of surprised me. I didn't know Jen was going to pull that out of there.
Hey, I had a jewelry kit as a kid with plastic jewelry. You made it and you like snap things on. Mm-hmm. It was the Mighty Isis jewelry maker thing.
Folks, of course, have no idea what we're talking about, but they can go check YouTube, I'm sure, and see just how terrible our children's entertainment was back then. And then Sesame was a bobtail calico cat. And I have to admit, I have no idea what happened to Shazam. She was a good cat, but we had Sesame until, she grew old and died we must have had her for 10 or 12 years, I guess. I think she died when I was in high school. I remember when she died, we went out and buried her, and that was all very sad. And I've never had a cat since then, but Sesame was an awesome cat. I remember when I was young, she had kittens, and I just remember being just absolutely amazed by her. Just standing up to like really big dogs that were like 5 times her size and making them back down. And yeah, she was just an awesome cat. But I don't know. I guess Jen and I are still just as core dog. I have nothing against cats. I think they're great.
They're great.
Honestly, I don't know why we don't have a cat. I guess just because we have dogs. Having the dogs is almost an accident. I grew up with dogs, too. I grew up with dogs and cats, living on a little tiny boat. Sesame and Boatnik and Wiggles and all of us on the 42-foot steel hull. I think you said you didn't really have dogs much growing up, right?
Oh, we did occasionally, but my mom is very much a cat person.
Yeah.
So we always had cats.
Yep.
In fact, when I was a kid, I always would choose the black and gray striped ones, usually with a white bib and white paw tips and things. And the first one I had was named Pizza. And so after that, because cats kind of come and go a bit.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do.
Sesame doesn't come and go. Sesame was there.
Well, you had an unusual cat. But we had, I guess, outdoor cats more than indoor cats. Anyway, I had Pizza 1 through 7. In my childhood.
So I guess that would answer, you obviously have a very cavalier attitude towards your cats. They come, they go. They're their own people.
No, Mom always had cats in the house as well. It's just...
That's weird.
Yeah.
I cannot think of Sesame that way. Yeah, she was a big part of our family. We got Scuttle. Yeah. Because I don't know why. It was totally your initiative.
It was me, baby.
You just saw an ad in the classifieds, I guess? Lhasa Opsa Pupsies? Why did you even do it?
We were talking about it, actually.
Were we? Yeah, it's all a blur to me.
Oh, yeah, I know. So the Mr. and I lived together in Morrison.
By that you mean me?
Yeah, you're my Mr.
Yeah, okay.
I'm your Mrs.
Yes, all right.
Just so we're clear.
Mm-hmm.
Where we were in the apartment when we first lived together, we couldn't have a dog.
Yeah.
And then we rented a house, which I think we could, but we were both working a lot and weird hours and stuff.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't work. But when we bought our house, finally, we felt we were stable enough.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd been married a year or something by that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I definitely had a hankering for a dog. And so I kept an eye out. And when I saw one in the paper, we went and we rushed wasn't too far away, maybe a mile or two away.
Mm-hmm.
And we got there in front of somebody, and I can remember this person just standing there, like practically perched on my shoulder, because they wanted to look at these puppies, but we'd gotten there first, so we could have get to have first choice. And we chose Scuttle.
Yeah, she was a good little girl.
She was an awesome dog.
Yeah. So why don't we have cats? Obviously, we both have a history with cats. Me, a very deep, loving relationship with cats. You, a very casual, they come, they go relationship.
Yeah. I think...
I mean, they rip up furniture.
Yeah.
That's a problem, and you don't want to declaw them. And so, there's issues like that.
Litter box.
Well, I mean, that's no worse than having to pick up dog crap when you take them for a walk.
I think it is, because the litter box is inside. And you can have poop in your house all the time.
It doesn't have to be inside. I mean, the cat can go through a dog flap just as well as a dog.
Yeah, but then if it's going to go through a dog flap, it might as well go poop outside.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. Can you train a cat to... I don't know.
Yeah. If you have the litter box outside or whatever, they just go outside.
I don't know. We had a litter box for Sesame in that boat the whole time. It was never really a problem.
Well, you were a kid. You probably never noticed, but it probably stank all the time. It was awful.
So that's why we don't have cats. Litter box.
Yeah, that's it. And also,
I'm sure they've made new breakthroughs in litter box technology.
There's all sorts of special lifters and sifters and things.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is, I really don't like it when cats poop in my garden boxes where I'm growing my vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
And cats do that. They love loose soil.
Mm-hmm.
So that's primarily why we don't have cats.
There you go, Peter. That's I can't speak for Tom Vassell if that's his problem, but our problem, loose soil.
Poop. We don't like to poop.
Okay. Next up, Priscilla would like to know if I am a righty or a lefty. She only asked because she's a righty and always wonders how I can use the zoom button on my camera so quickly with my left hand. And you're right, I am right-handed. I am well, actually, it's interesting. I'm kind of both. Apparently, as a young kid, I was totally ambidextrous, 100% ambidextrous. I could do everything equally well, right, bat, anything. And my mom says, and I've asked her why, and she doesn't remember why, but she actually trained me out of it. And she said, no, you have to favor one or the other. And she says, yes, I know I did that, and no, I do not know why I did that. I'm sure it was on the advice of someone, and I thought it was very important. And to this day, I'm like, I would love to be ambidextrous. How awesome would that be? So to this day, I am just kind of a weird mishmash. I am right-handed when I write things, but I bat or I golf left-handed.
Yeah, like you golf.
I mini golf.
We don't golf.
If I were to golf, it would be left-handed.
Yes, darling.
Yes.
Have you ever actually even gone to a real golf course and ever golfed? You probably have.
I have been to a driving range and golfed. That
Did
counts.
you go with some work buddies or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was fun. It was fun. It was actually a blast. I mean, that made me appreciate that I could see it's very satisfying when you whack that thing just right and it just flies off, but it does this weird spin thing. It feels really good. And it feels really terrible when you just kind of glance it wrong and then you just feel it all through the pole. But yeah. But anyway, yeah. So
your golf stick.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe my weird quasi-ambidextrousness makes it easier for me. But, it's been something I've been meaning to do is actually, while I'm actually filming a run-through, have Jen grab an iPhone and just film me filming so folks can see what it's like. Because it is really kind of cumbersome. If you watch the overhead static camera, often, if you watch long enough, you'll see me holding the camera completely incorrectly with my left hand, and just kind of having to reach around with my big spidery fingers to try and reach that zoom button that is not in remotely the right place, and my hand completely obscures most of the screen that I'm filming on, so I generally can't even see what I'm filming. I'm just kind of having to go by raw feel because my hand is on the wrong side of the camera. I don't understand why they don't make cameras that are for lefties. Not that I'm a righty, but still. Interesting question. Okay. Let's see here. Jason asks if we've ever been to Cedar Point. If not, and you like roller coasters, it's the best park in the world, honey pie.
Ooh.
I have not heard of Cedar Point, so I'm going to assume that means I have not. Cedar Point, the roller coaster capital of the world, which is in Ohio. Nope, definitely have not been there. And in all honesty, I got to admit, I'm really not that anxious to go. I mean, as a little kid, of course, I loved roller coasters, and I remember in our 20s. I mean, you and I, we went to Disney. We went to every amusement park we could. We loved them. And, we'd do roller coasters multiple times. But I don't know, at some point in our 30s, I guess. I guess it was after we moved to Europe. Right?
It was shortly before that.
Was it?
Yeah.
Had you made a decision, I am done with roller coasters?
Well,
I don't think so, because we still went to roller coasters in
We've
Texas.
never been to Disney, whatever, in Paris.
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think for whatever reason, when we moved to Europe, we just suddenly lost interest. Because I remember we would still do stuff like that in Texas, which was the last place we lived in America. And I would imagine while we were still living in Texas that if we happened to be in Ohio, hey, let's swing by Cedar Point. That sounds really awesome. I mean, I assume at some point there must have been I don't know. Is it a coincidence that we went to Europe and then suddenly, all the really good stuff wasn't available to us anymore?
Yeah, I don't know. I remember
or are we just getting
at some
older?
Point thinking, I'm tired of my brain rattling around. This isn't fun anymore. It
okay.
gives me a headache. And
I was unaware of that.
So maybe I just steered us away from that.
Jason, you're making us deal with the hard hidden truths that have lain dormant in our relationship for all these decades now. But I think we're both kind of over them now. I mean, I'm not adverse to it.
Well, I think also we went bungee jumping. And
that's a good point, too. I mean, after you've skydove and after you've bungee jumped, roller coasters just don't have the same visceral thrill anymore. They're too contained, no matter what they are. And we've done all kinds of crazy stuff. But, none of them were as terrifying as that bungee jump.
That was pretty bad.
That was probably the single scariest thing I've ever had to face. It was absolutely insane.
Yeah, and you just did it.
Yep,
like
just do it. And then I scared the crap out of you.
Yeah, he comes back up we'll let somebody ask us about the bungee jump experience.
Yeah. No one's here asking about bungee jumping. They're asking about roller coasters.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. 2 more, honey pie.
Yeah.
Do you want to say Brexit for last, or do you want to do Brexit next?
Let's save it for last.
All righty. So Eric, you may recall, right off the bat, asked, what are your favorite TV shows? What are your favorite songs and bands?
Okay.
Thank you. Keep up the good work. So, I think we've talked well enough about songs and bands.
Yeah, probably.
A few people have asked, actually, TV shows, and I've just kind of rattled off a few, and you can name one. What's your favorite show of all time, honey pie?
West Wing.
There you go. If nothing else, Jen now has that memorized.
Yep.
But in between, when we were filming and not filming, I spent a couple of minutes just for you, Eric, to compile not my top 10, but my top 20 TV shows that are active right now. I started actually trying to make just my top 10 of all time, and oh my gosh, that is so hard. That is practically impossible. There's a lifetime of awesome TV I have watched, and I just couldn't do it. So to make it a little bit easier, I narrowed it down to shows. They might be on hiatus between seasons and stuff like that, but these are shows that are still airing right now. These are the top 20 shows I watch. Jen doesn't watch probably even half of these shows, maybe even 2/3 of these shows. I'm a TV junkie. She is a moderate TV junkie. But I'm just going to go through this really quick.
I read.
Jen reads. Oh my gosh, Jen is such a voracious reader. I used to be. I don't know what happened to me.
You keep saying when you retire.
I know, but then I started doing this instead.
Well,
that was the plan. I was going to have all the time in the world to read. and I do. I read more now than I ever have.
Yeah, it's just on the internet.
No, it's board game manuals.
Oh, bloody.
I read as much as you do easily.
Yeah.
Just technical board game manuals.
Yeah.
I put you to shame. But Jen is a crazy voracious reader. She devours 800-page books in a day, kind of a thing.
Oh, maybe not quite that much.
Oh, well, I don't think I'm exaggerating much. But anyway, top 20 currently on-air TV shows. Number 20, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And it's my number 20 because, look, I'll admit, it's not the greatest show in the world. But I am charmed by the interconnectivity of the Marvel Universe, and I do feel like it's worth watching and sticking with it. And I'm always hoping for another one of those really cool Captain America, Winter Soldier-like crossovers. I don't know why. It seems that they have kind of abandoned those now. Heck, even the cast of the show has started to complain. I guess there's some kind of political stuff going on between Marvel TV, which is still under Disney control, versus Marvel Cinema, which is under Marvel control. And so that's why there's been a big break, which is heartbreaking because it was so awesome. That Winter Soldier. But anyway, but still, I enjoy the show. but it is my number 20. I mean, it is. I'm not guilty, but it's a borderline guilty pleasure. But the rest of these, not guilty pleasures at all. Jen, actually, that's probably one of the few on here that Jen watches. She likes Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., don't you, honey pie?
Yeah, it's all right.
Yep. And interesting, that's the only Marvel show on here. I've watched all the Netflix
what about
stuff.
Agent Carter?
Well, I hate to break this to you, honey pie.
It's not on your top 20.
No, Agent Carter's been canceled.
Really?
She's not coming back.
I like a strong female character.
I know, everybody did. Except for stupid people who didn't actually watch. Because I guess the ratings were always terrible no matter what, and we were lucky to have 2 seasons. It is too bad. I mean, Agent Carter would have been in my number 20 instead of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because that show was the bee's knees. It was the bomb, yo. But in her, I mourn her loss and pay tribute to her service by watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Anyway, number 19, South Park. I can't imagine you ever even watched a single episode, have you?
I think I've seen bits and pieces as I've walked by.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's maybe getting a little long in the tooth, but I don't know. If you ever get a chance to watch the behind-the-scenes making of that show, it is stunning to me how they can just be so topical and just turn around a completely done episode in under a week. It's phenomenal, and it still stays relevant. It skewers everybody. It's completely merciless, and it's really, really clever. It doesn't make me laugh out loud all that much, but I mean, the episodes relate. What was it? The Richard Dawkins 2-parter was brilliant. I mean, that was just so absolutely amazing.
I'd probably watch that one actually if you feel like downloading it.
I don't know, honey pie. I don't know if you would care for how they treated Richard Dawkins.
Oh.
But anyway, number 19 is South Park. Number 18, this is a favorite, Survivor.
Yeah, of course.
Talk about reinventing yourself. I mean, it's amazing. Every season, they just keep refreshing it and making it new and making it different and coming up with really cool, interesting, exciting twists. And, the amazing... I know there's so many people out there say, oh, it's all fake, it's all rigged. And no, you don't fake that kind of stuff. Yes, they maybe enhance the reality. They maybe, give us stuff out of order. They, They create storylines that maybe aren't quite as perfectly dovetailed but it doesn't change the fact that the raw human emotion and the relationships that are playing out there is all very real, very rich, very deep. And, that show makes me understand why people like sports. Because I have never cared about sports. Even when I was a little kid trying to be popular before we moved on the boat and I pretended to like sports, I have always hated sports. But Jen and I, we get so wrapped up in those incredible competitions where everything is on the line, Yeah,
well, they're clever competitions as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, professional sports are clever too. I mean, there's interesting. I mean, if you are willing to, give yourself over to the study of the game. Sure. I mean, they all have depth and meaning and complexity and stats and all of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, Survivor's just amazing, and it always will be. Number 17 would be Homeland, which I absolutely adore. Mostly for Claire Danes and Mandy Patinkin. I mean, they are just... they just feel so real to me as characters, and just so grounded. And I know this is a flight of fancy, although actually I know a lot of people complain about, Homeland is just total BS. It's completely out of touch reality. It's not really the case. You can go out and find, there are actually articles out there where actual former CIA operatives have actually gone on the record saying, no, this takes some liberties, of course, because it has to, but this captures the feel. This captures the heart of what is actually happening out there. So, I've always really respected it. Yeah, maybe they went on with the redhead for a little too long, but they've never been afraid to reinvent themselves. And, the last season was in Germany was absolutely phenomenal. And Claire Danes is just amazing. And Mandy Patinkin is great too. So, love Homeland at number 17. Number 16 would be Penny Dreadful, which is absolutely delightful in its Victorian decadence. I've been for years watching Jen watch Jane Austen movies and Downton Abbeys. Don't get me wrong, I like all those too, but it is so wonderful to just kind of bask in this rich, decadent, creepy, noirish take on, Victorian tales of manners and, melding all these different really cool storylines. The high drama, the performances, the production values. It's absolutely phenomenal. I just really, really love Penny Dreadful. Nothing else like it on TV. And then number 15, what, Honey Pie?
Why am I not watching Penny Dreadful?
Because it's dark. Because it's basically a horror show.
All right.
I think I did actually try to get you to watch the first episode and you wouldn't finish it. I think.
Okay.
Jen is very, very picky. Jen, her list of top 20 would be 15 survivalist reality TV shows, give or take. And am I wrong? And probably 12. 8 home improvement, gardening type shows, and then whatever I wanted to watch that she could stomach effectively. Jen loves that kind of stuff, and that stuff is all cool too. Jen loves her Phil and her Kirsty.
My what?
Phil and Kirsty.
Oh yes.
Let's see.
I thought you said feeling of curtsy.
Yeah, yes, Jen loves her feeling of curtsy. So anyway, number 15, The Fall, is an amazing police procedural. And I have to admit, I have never gotten into the CSIs or the laws and the orders. None of those have ever held any attraction to me whatsoever. I think I've watched a couple episodes here and there when Robin Williams would make a guest appearance or something like that. But they've just never, I know there's Lumiere. That should be awesome. But I just don't care. They've never captured me. But The Fall really did. And I'll admit, I started watching it because it was Gillian Anderson. And she's awesome because, hey, it's Agent Scully, tracking down real criminal. But it's such... it's such a mature show. And I don't mean mature because it's got gross out gags and boobs and whatnot, but because it is very adult in its storytelling. It's basically the tale of two people. What was the old ad? Two hunters, I think. There are two sides of the same coin. The regular everyday guy who turns out is a really, really bad guy, and the police detective who, but who on the outside just looks perfectly normal, and the police detective tracking him down. And and it gives equal time to both of them. And it's just riveting. And she is amazing. It's absolutely wonderful. I think the third season is about to start, and so I'm very, very excited for The Fall. And then number 14, Saturday Night Live, which I have not missed an episode of Saturday Night Live since the heyday of the late 80s. I have always watched it. It is always must-see TV for me. And yeah, I know, maybe in a good episode, 1 out of 5 jokes will land. That's fine, and the other 4 will all be clunkers. I don't care. In high school, I did a lot of live theater, and I did some study of it in college too. And I perpetually stand in awe of what those not ready for primetime players put together week in and week out. It's just absolutely amazing to me. And actually, having been able to go and see it filmed live last year made me appreciate it all the more. Man, every time anybody says, man, I remember when it used to be great. Every time anybody says that, they're always talking about the cast when they were in high school and college. And now the current cast is terrible. But you know what? Cut forward 15 years from now, and people are going to be saying, man, I remember when the cast was great because they were in high school and college. The casts are all great. They are all of their time. They're all talented, funny people doing their best to put on a really great show. And I just think it's phenomenal. I think it's absolutely amazing. Then number 13. And actually number 13 and number 12, practically a tie. But number 13, Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. And number 12, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. The two awesome spin-offs of Jon Stewart's The Daily Show. The heir apparent to Jon Stewart. Because, no offense to Noah, and the nightly show is fine, but they're just Trevor Noah and oh my gosh, I can't think because he hasn't been on for several weeks. And Larry Wilmore, they do good work. And you know what? And Jon Stewart did good work. But the problem with all those shows was having to produce 20 minutes every night, 4 nights a week. It's very, very tough. Colbert pulled it off. Colbert is in my top 10 shows of all time, easy, because that was the only current daily show, current nightly show, old nightly. Even when Jon Stewart was at his very best, they could not keep the quality up night after night after night. And as soon as John Oliver went off on his own and did last week, and they spent an entire week to put one show together. Oh my gosh, it's so amazing. And now Samantha Bee is doing the same thing with Full Frontal, and she is just killing it. I mean, these two shows are just phenomenally entertaining, phenomenally enlightening, and they deliver on the promise of what Jon Stewart set out to do. Gosh, is it decades ago now? Man, it still breaks my heart that Colbert went off to do facile late night stuff. And, when what he did was so important, but John Oliver and Samantha Bee, they are picking up the slack with Full Frontal and Last Week Tonight. I think it's Last Week Tonight. It's just the John Oliver show. But anyway, and then number 11, House of Cards, which I know is silly, and it's bombastic. And in fact, actually, I actually have a very, very positive, upbeat view of politics in America. I do not in any way, shape, or form share the widely held cynical view of all politicians are bad, and Underwood and all of that. They just typify the worst. I think people who go into public service to try to make our lives better are to be commended and to be respected and admired. They're not all perfect, but the vast majority of them do it out of good intentions. But it doesn't change the fact that House of Cards is absolutely amazing, and Kevin Spacey and Robin Wright are just mesmerizing to watch. And the intricate plots, it's trashy, and I don't care. I love it. But now we move on to the top 10. Man, this is going to take a while. I need to pick it up, folks. Showtime's The Affair, which really, really surprised me. I'll be honest, the main reason I watched it is because I love The Wire. And what's his name? Dominic Weist, I think, of The Wire. And I have always loved More Attorney. And, the two of them, I got to try this out. I don't particularly care about this multi-season storyline about a man and a woman having extramarital affairs and all the ways it rips apart their family and all that. And it's like, I'm not going to care about that, but man, I just love these actors so much. But what an amazing show it is. The entire point of it is every episode tells the events of whatever was going on from two completely different perspectives. Even though they're showing the same actual, broadly following the same plot, their perceptions of what happened, of what their actions were, and how they justified to themselves what they're doing when they're destroying their lives and their families' lives, is amazingly fascinating to me. It's just really, really eye-opening. And of course, because humans' imperfect memory and false memories is such a true part of life, and to see it played out there like that, it's just absolutely brilliant. And then of course all the performances are great, and the mystery stuff and the non-linear storytelling, it's all absolutely phenomenal, easily top 10. But now let's move on to number 9. It's been pretty serious for a while, so let's have some laughs with Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which, honey, you would not, oh my gosh. Remember Seinfeld? Mm-hmm. Remember how terrible they all were? Mm. Oh, they were saints. Always Sunny in Philadelphia is, what if the gang from Seinfeld were really just the worst people in the world? It is, none of them are likable. Well, I guess maybe Charlie's kind of likable because he's just kind of hapless and surprisingly competent when given the opportunity to sing. But I just love it. It's just so outrageous and balls to the wall, absolutely hilarious comedy. One of the few shows that consistently makes me laugh out loud. Love Always Sunny. Then we move on to number 8, Better Call Saul, which I just finished up the second season 2 weeks ago, I think. And wow, that show just keeps getting better with every passing episode. And I think, of course, a big part of it is, having seen Breaking Bad, I know what happens. I know where he's going to end up. And he is so far away from that right now. Jimmy McGill is such an interesting and multifaceted character. He's so well-rounded and he's got so much depth and complexity, but I know what he's going to become. And so it's just watching this slow motion
train wreck that is just, utterly fascinating, compelling, and then, just wildly entertaining too. I mean, it's so great to see Michael McKean on screen, in such an absolutely killer role. It's just, and beautifully plotted, and, of course, we all miss Breaking Bad, so it's just great to have Saul back. So that was number 8. Then we move on to number 7, Veep, where Julia Louis-Dreyfus and the rest of the cast, oh my gosh, they just kill it every week. Again, like House of Cards, well, it's interesting. I mean, I've certainly seen, real politicians who have seen the show and commented on it that it's closer to reality than they would like to admit. And I appreciate that, because all it does, I mean, it definitely humanizes these people, and it puts them in their absolute worst light every single week. But, again, much like, and they're all awful people, but I don't know. That's a grand tradition of comedy. Going back to Archie Bunker, going back to the Honeymooners, the thoroughly unlikable person, but that is still, through the power of personality and charisma of that actor, means you just can't turn away, and you care what happens to them. Even though you shouldn't like them, you still get pulled into their story, and Veep is just absolutely phenomenal. The writing is just so razor sharp. Just cuts like a knife. It's just absolutely amazing. But then moving on to number 6 would be Archer, which I love to death. An animated, well, they used to be spies. Now they're private detectives. I mean, another example of a show that has gone out of its way to reinvent itself over and over again and just gets better every time it does it. It's just absolutely phenomenal. And again, actually, I think what I love about it most is, the titular character, Archer, who is just... who could be so easily written as just kind of a bumbling fool, and misogynistic, and all his foibles and whatnot. It could be very, very easy to just hate this guy. But the thing is, he is so amazingly good at his job that, he just kind of pulls you along, and he's just so effortless. And he is having a great time doing it. So it's hard not to have a great time watching him having a great time going on his absolutely insane adventures. I absolutely love it to death. Then we move on to number 5, The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead is one of my favorite comic books of all time, and The Walking Dead is one of my favorite TV shows of all time. The places that show is willing to go, look at the flowers, is just mind-boggling to me. And... oh, man. It drives me nuts when I see people just spend so much time picking it apart over so many perceived plot holes that are almost never plot holes. It is a show that, while it's ostensibly about zombies, it's not. It's about the people. The zombies are just backdrop for this post-apocalyptic thing that pushes everybody to the limits. And every week when I go online after I've seen the show and people start complaining, well, that was really stupid. They shouldn't have done this or that or the other. I mean, everybody backseat driving like they would all be experts in a zombie apocalypse. It just absolutely drives me batty. I will grant that the show could do a better job of actually directing its scenes, because sometimes people say, well, that was really stupid. They never should have been in that situation. It's like, well, yes, they clearly should have, because if you were paying attention, you would have noticed this was actually happening to this character, but you could only barely see it half on screen. And so I'll give the audience that they're not willing to do the extra work to actually put 2 and 2 together, because the show often won't do it for you. I love the fact that the show is willing to go for long, long, quiet moments where they let you fill in the blanks to figure out what's going through people's heads. And, that the show has the emotional maturity to expect that of the audience, that everything doesn't have to be spelled out. And now, like I said, unfortunately, it means every week the audience goes online and complains, and they prove they do need it spelled out for them. But whatever, I find it riveting television, The Walking Dead. And now let's cheer things up a little bit. I've had enough of the dark doldrums there. Let's talk about number 4, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which is so delightful and so infinitely charming. And, I shouldn't like this show at all because it just so wallows in all these romantic comedy tropes. But the thing is, it knows it. It knows it's, being a cliche, and it loves it. It clearly loves the format that it's, I'm not going to say satirizing, And just the same way Desperate Housewives never truly satirized. I mean, because it respected what it was satirizing. I think Crazy Ex-Girlfriend does the same. But put all that aside, Rachel Bloom is just incredibly charismatic. And I think it's great to have a character, to have a lead female character who isn't perfect, who is real, who has real grounded neuroses, and is somebody who is so much more relatable than the typical Hollywood leading lady. And then on top of that, the music is just phenomenal. Jap battle rap, and I could if I wanted to, and I mean, oh my gosh, so many amazing songs. What, Honey Pie?
There's the funny one you sing to me sometimes.
Oh, I got big boobs. Yeah, Jen loved that one. It's just, it's so good. I was so happy to find out it had been renewed for a second season because it was so touch and go there. Then we go on to number 3, Rick and Morty. And I have talked about this one at length in the past. Just phenomenal. Community definitely would have made my top 10 or my top 15 of all time. And of course, it's gone. Dan Harmon has moved on, but look at what he's moved on to. Rick and Morty. It's crazy, wildly entertaining. But the thing is, it's so full of really big ideas. It tackles really cool, heady science fiction concepts week after week after week, and does it without even trying. It's just so amazing. And then it's just absolutely hilarious and so quotable. Just amazing. But anyway, moving on to number 2 would be Fargo. These first 2 seasons were not just about. They were total perfection. Quite frankly, Fargo should be my number 1, but I can't. But I mean, and the tonal shift between season 1 and season 2 is so perfect. And the stuff they did in season 2, just the really crazy, off-the-wall stuff that just kept you guessing and just kept, oh my God, what did I just see? The richly drawn characters. I mean, again, I talked about this with Homeland, that feel so real and so grounded. The sense of place, the atmosphere, it's just amazing. Maybe the best TV there is, period. But it doesn't change the fact that for number 1, I have to go with Game of Thrones. I mean, particularly this season, particularly after, I'm not even going to talk about it, but it's just the best. And there's gratuitous nudity. So what? People get naked. I don't particularly care. They do it because it helps their viewership. That's fine. I've never read the books. I'm never going to read the books, but I am so hooked. And, it's got its claws in me so much. And I know sometimes people complain, oh, it's going too slow, and then, oh, it's going too fast. And I don't know. For me, it's always just right. It is an amazing roller coaster. And, when it builds to those big, big, epic moments, that like no other show does. It's just the best there is. And so that was my top 20 current shows on TV. And now, Honey Pie, we can dodge it no longer. It's time to talk about Brexit.
Well, I think you're going to talk mostly about Brexit.
You don't have much to say about Brexit? Because Simon wants to know, what are our thoughts on the UK referendum to leave the EU? Are we worried what will happen to ourselves if we vote to leave? Will you be voting? And do you think it will affect distribution tax for UK board gamers, e.g., EU shipping friendly on Kickstarter? Thanks in advance.
Oh my goodness. Well, I know you know a lot more about this than I do. Again, it's one of those things that, oh dear, I just hope that they don't leave.
Both Jen and I hope fervently that they don't leave. I don't want to be insulting to anybody, and I know maybe there's people who are Brexiters who are listening to this. Look, I'm sorry, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. For me, what it comes down to, it kind of strikes me like somebody who's said, you know what? I've had it with this government. I'm going to go out and live off the grid. I don't want to have to deal with this modern world and all the problems it creates for me, so I'm just going to go back in my hidey hole and get away from those dirty foreigners who want to impose their rules on me and suck all my money dry. I mean, all the primary arguments, make Britain great again, come on. Oh, come on. That just makes me cringe to hear that argument. Or Brits for Britain, or Britain for Brits. The epitome of insular thinking and xenophobia, the us versus them, the absolute worst facet of humanity, tribalism, the keep them out. They're taking our jobs. They're sucking off the teat of the NHS. What have they done for us? Get them out. Britain, it's just, gah. And they try to make arguments, but think of all the money we'll save, the £9 billion. It's like less than half of 1% of the GDP. It doesn't matter. It's a drop in the bucket compared to all the benefits we get. But they're tyrants and we have no control and we need to take control of our destiny. Hey, how about instead of running away from your problems, you actually work with the rest of the world to fix them? How about that? Oh my gosh. Simon, why do you ask? I'm sorry. And then, this week, they start getting all these polls. I'm going to ignore them. Polls mean nothing. I used to do polls. I used to work for Altair Research when I went as a student at the University of Washington back in the late 80s. I mean, I don't believe any of them. Yes, they voted the stupid Tories in. They keep doing it. The conservative streak in the UK drives me nuts. But they've just got to come to their senses. Humanity is stronger when we are together.
Yep. Everything good happens when you share information and everybody's lives
work together.
Yep.
And stop holding people at arm's length and get away from us. We'll go our own way. No, we are all in this together.
Yep, all in this together.
Don't do it. Don't do it, voters, please. Oh my gosh. So that's kind of my thoughts. And again, I apologize to anybody who's listening to this and they think I'm, wide-eyed idealist or whatever. I'm sorry. That's just the way I feel. I think it's the worst. It is the worst of humanity. Rooting. It's a movement driven by fear. It just drives you nuts.
Well, you think about all the things that have driven humanity forward, and it has been people sharing ideas.
People coming together.
People being tolerant of each other. I mean, we've just gone to Istanbul, which is a perfect example of a place where all sorts of cultures, religions, ideals.
Well, it's also a perfect example of places where that's not happening.
I'm talking historically.
Okay, all right. Okay, fair enough.
Historically, where
yes.
people came together and everybody benefited. Mm-hmm. And
yes, fair enough.
So why not make that a worldwide thing?
Yes, England, you're going the wrong way. You need to be leading the charge, not running away from the fight. That's what you're doing. Anybody who votes for it is a coward. Okay, I got to stop that. I'm sorry, that's insulting. I don't mean to insult anybody, but gosh, it gets my goat up. It's just...
We don't even have goats.
Yeah. But are we worried? I don't know. We've talked to our landlord about it. I mean, it's supposed to be 2 years, I think. That if it does go through,
it'll take
there's a 2-year timetable, a clock, and nobody knows what'll happen. We might have to leave Malta. I mean, Malta is going to be a special case anyway because, interesting Malta trivia fact, Malta is the only former Commonwealth country of the British Empire that voted to stay. When England was pulling out, they said, no, please, take us with you. And England said, yeah, thanks, but no. So, I don't know. But honestly, if Britain does this, I don't know that I want to go back. And I know that's heartbreaking for Jen.
I love England.
I know, and I love England too, and I love the people of England. But if they do this...
Well, it's like you keep telling me about Trump. Even if Trump wins, it's just one. It's just one president. It's the arc of history is long.
Yes. But this is different. I mean, this, the European Union is one of the greatest achievements of the 20th century.
I agree.
Be strong. Be great, Britain. Actually lead instead of retreat is all I have to say about that. But anyway, as for taxes, I don't know. I honestly, I haven't even looked at it. That's such a minor thing compared to the grand sweep of what's at stake. Of course. Not only is it epically stupid, but it won't destroy the pound, but, and I'll even grant you, Exeters, 10 years, 20 years from now, it might actually be a net positive. But you will go through hell to get there. it will hurt Britain so bad to say, screw you, rest of the world, we're going or EU, we're going the rest of our way. I mean, and I know it's the 5th strongest economy in the world and all of that stuff, but yeah, it's just bad on so many levels. Yeah, long term would be great, but it's going to cause more hardship and suffering. The increased cost of board games is the least of it. It's just, oh man, honey, we should have done Brexit first so we could have ended on top 20 TV shows. Because that was much more pleasant. No editing. We're going to end. Thanks, Simon. Quick, folks, send some actually happy questions. Or send more politics questions. Obviously, I have something to say. And I look forward to seeing what will happen on the Rahdo Runs Through Guild tomorrow. Oh, man. But still, actually, kudos to everybody. I mean, I don't know if people noticed after the last couple of podcasts where religion was discussed and American politics were discussed at length. Those were 2 really awesome threads where everybody was very kind and respectful. And kudos to everybody out there listening. My apologies. I realize I went off. I got a bit ranty McRant face there. I will try to cool my jets. But you asked Simon, and now you know. And that's it, folks. Episode 13 is in the bag. How many more? Speaking of which, how many more bags you got, honey? Is that you got 5 more?
I got about 8 more I'm gluing up.
8 more, all right.
Oh, and then I've got another 25 over there.
But wait, there's 25 more.
More questions.
Sorry, I think we are done for the evening. But as always, folks, questions to questions@rahdo.com. And otherwise, sorry again also, like I said up front, for the 2-week late. I think next month is going to be a couple weeks late as well, but then hopefully we'll get back onto a regular schedule after that. But otherwise, folks, I'm going to say that's it, folks. Thanks for listening. Questions, comments, concerns, as always, please let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have a very, very nice day. Talk to you later. So long.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.